and welcome to the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. You can join the meeting in person at 5555 Perimeter Loop or access the meeting via the live stream on the city's website. We welcome public participation, including public comments on cases. At this time, if you will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Beal, welcome this evening. Could I have you please call roll?
Sure. Mr. Snare?
Here.
Ms. Call?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Way?
Here.
Mr. Supelak?
Here.
Mr. Fishman's absent.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Looking to the Commission for a motion to accept tonight's documents and record the minutes from the January 6th and the January 20th.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Do I have a second? Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Supelak?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Snare?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to City Council when rezoning and platting of properties are under consideration. In such cases, City Council receives recommendations from the Commission. In other cases, the Commission has the final decision-making responsibility. Anyone intending to address the Commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. There's one case eligible for the consent agenda this evening. It's case 4, the DCRC Mobility Hub at 5600 Post Road, 21-14 AFDP. Does anyone wish to pull this from the consent agenda?
I don't want to pull it from the agenda, but I wanted to make a comment and wonder if it could be addressed by the staff. It is very minor, but there's one of the inclusions is of a chalkboard. And I just wonder if a chalkboard is sort of the right announcement vehicle and whether staff might consider suggesting something a little more permanent or less defacable or whatever. And I totally defer to staff. And if that would mean it doesn't go on the consent agenda, then I would pull my comment.
Ms. Roush.
I think we could just add a condition that we investigate that, if that's...
Can I ask, why are we putting it on the consent agenda? I guess
Typically, a consent agenda item is something that we've seen before that doesn't have material changes from the last time we saw it, or the Commission is comfortable with staff administering the T's crossing and the I's dotted.
Right. I would like to pull it from the consent agenda.
I have a request to pull that from the agenda, so we will pull it and treat it as an ordinary case this evening. Anyone intending to address the Commission on any administrative cases needs to be sworn in. Would you please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to the Commission this evening? Thank you. I'd like to see if we can, if I can entertain a motion for approval of tonight's documents and the 2 meeting minutes.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second. We
pulled the consent agenda item. We're going to treat that in the agenda. Sorry, the mobility hub. We're going to treat that in the agenda, but we still need to approve the documents into the minutes.
Didn't we already do that?
No.
Am I wrong? Oh. Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Supelak?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Snare?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. All right, we are going to go to item 4 first, the DCRC Mobility Hub at 5600 Post Road, 22-014 AFDP. This application is a request for the construction of a mobility hub at the Dublin Community Rec Center. The 57.81 acre site is zoned Planned Unit Development District, Kaufman Park, and is located north of the intersection of Post Road with Kaufman Park Drive. Hello, Ms. Molinex. How are you this evening?
Good, thank you, and good evening. This is a request for an amended final development plan with a minor text modification for a proposed mobility hub located at the Dublin Community Rec Center. The site is highlighted here in yellow and is located at the north of the intersection of Kaufman Park Drive and Post Road. The site contains the Dublin Community Rec Center and is located within Kaufman Park. The site is Zone Plan Unit Development, Kaufman Park. These are the existing conditions of the project area adjacent to the senior lounge at the Dublin Community Rec Center. Since 1995, there have been multiple amended final development plans for the site modifications, including a Dublin Community Rec Center expansion and the bocce ball courts, which are anticipated to become an outdoor space for group activity. The commission provided informal feedback on the proposed mobility hub on December 8th of last year. So the proposed mobility hub is 1,858 square feet, which includes 3 canopies shown here highlighted in blue, one over a seating area, one over bike parking, and another over a COGO station. The mobility hub features various seating, a bike repair station, mobility kiosk, and new landscaping. A minor text modification is required for the mobility kiosk to permit a digital changeable copy sign. This is the rendering for the mobility hub in its entirety. Various seating options are shown, which include picnic tables and benches. The mobility hub will also have various bike parking, including a COGO station. Colors and materials have been chosen for the canopies, which include wood cladding, gray steel framing, and the colors of additional items in the mobility hub are gray or another muted color option, with the exception of a pop of color for the green picnic tables. The criteria is either met with conditions, or not applicable. The proposed minor text modification is consistent with all applicable review criteria, and approval is recommended to permit one digital changeable copy sign for the Dublin Community Rec Center Mobility Hub in accordance with the following: that the sign is located on the property to which it refers, that the sign is not visible from the public right-of-way or adjacent properties, and the sign does not exceed 8 square feet in size. And the proposed amended final development plan is consistent with all applicable review criteria. Planning recommends approval with the following conditions: that the applicant continue to work with staff on all canopy lighting to meet the flush mounting requirement, or the lighting is positioned behind the purlins to minimize glare. That the applicant will continue to work with staff on finalizing all 3 canopy locations and the relocation of the existing utilities within the disturbed area to the satisfaction of the city engineer. That the applicant continue to work with staff to finalize all plant species and submit a finalized landscape plan subject to staff review and approval, and that the applicant continue to work with staff to finalize all mobility hub sign-like features regarding design and colors. And lastly, that the applicant apply for building permits and permanent sign permits through building standards prior to construction. Additionally, we have one additional recommendation for conditional of approval, and that would be that the chalkboard was recommended for approval to fulfill interactive and placemaking qualities requested, and I can add that condition that staff look into that further as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the applicant is in attendance this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Mullinex. If we could do questions for staff at this time or the applicant. Mr. Way.
So one of the questions I had was related to the fact that the shelters are facing to the north. And so they're subject to wind and rain kind of coming into them. I just wondered if there was any thought about creating some kind of a refuge in the pedestrian one where people could actually get out of the wind and if they were waiting there for a while?
So I do just want to mention that there are glass partitions as part of the main mobility hub feature, which would help to prevent wind kind of, creating a undesirable environment. But additionally, if we should consider a different orientation for the mobility hub canopy, we can certainly work with the applicant on that.
So there's panels that they don't show up in the documents, or?
They are shown on the rendering. It might just be hard to see. Let me show you here. They are shown right here on the side. I don't know if you can see. Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Way, could I have you turn your microphone on?
Did I turn it off? It went off by itself, didn't it? Sorry. That doesn't seem to give the really enough protection, so I just wondered if that's something that could be looked at. Just thinking of these are all year-round shelters, right? And oftentimes you'll see transit shelters that have protection so that you can actually walk into something and be protected from the wind. And the fact that these are open towards the north, that was just a comment I had. The other comment I had, and I don't know if it's just a graphic issue, but if you look at the plan, the illustrative plan, there's the blue dashed lines that depict the canopy, and it looked like they're not actually covering like the bikes. And I don't know if maybe that's just a graphic thing, like they slid in the rendering, in the plan view. But I was going to, if you could pull up that. Sheet 11. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you would like me to pull up?
The illustrative plan on sheet 11.
The,
For what it's worth, Mr. Way, on the civil, I guess I don't even know if it's civil, looks like it's civil.
Yeah.
15 of 22, those canopies extend further.
Which I did take note of. I just wanted to confirm it because on the illustrative, it shows the bike sticking out. And I'm thinking, why do you have a cover if your bikes aren't covered? So it looks like the blue lines just shifted on the rendering, perhaps. So confirmation, yes, bikes are well under the cover. Okay. And one other question about the ADA ramp. Because of the slopes and all of that, it sits right in the middle of where people are circulating. And I know you're going from the pedestrian shelter to perhaps a vehicle. And I assume that if you're in a wheelchair, you would go down the ramp and somehow that vehicle is then picking you up on a inside ramp of the bus or whatever, or is it somebody in a car? I'm just wondering, is that the ideal location for that functionality of this? It seems like it's disruptive to the sidewalk and it doesn't make it even. I know it's kind of the direct route, but I feel if it's off to the side a little bit more, or somehow like maybe further to the west, that it would be not right in the middle of everything. And I don't know if that could be looked at.
we can certainly look at that. I think the intent with the design, and I'm happy to defer this to the consultant as well from HDR Engineering, but was to have the closest proximity to the seating so that if someone were elderly or, didn't want to go a far distance to get on the Dublin Connector shuttle, that access would be easy for them. But I will defer to the consultant to chime in.
If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Justin Robbins with HDR Engineering, residence at 428 West College Street, Granville, Ohio, 43023. The location, just to answer the specific question, the location of the ADA curb ramp, so if we moved it to the right, there is a speed hump in the middle of the road that does cause a problem. The reason that we did place it there, again, as staff had mentioned, was to provide as close a connectivity to that pedestrian shelter as we could without disrupting too much of the rest of the site. We did explore options. We were looking at a much larger curb ramp, but the issue was the amount of concrete, the amount of roadway it would take to actually get that done was a bit prohibitive. So we were trying to keep it as limited as possible in terms of the effect on the overall site and the amount of work that it would require in order to get that implemented.
I could appreciate all the reasons why you put it where it was, but the thing that caught my eye was the actual, the rendering, where you've got the 4 bollards, you've got the ramp, and it looks like, that's the sidewalk. And as I mentioned last time, I walk here a lot. So I know that there's through movement that going over to the park and stuff, especially between the rec center and the park, there is quite a bit of movement between there. And it just looked like there was a lot of stuff happening that potentially was just a barrier to that free-flowing kind of sidewalk movement.
It's a challenging site. There's not a whole lot of space to play with, and I shouldn't say to play with, but to design around, and then to fit an ADA curb ramp that meets all of the requirements, both in terms of cross movement and then just getting the grade down to the street. It is something that we've explored quite a bit, and this was the solution that we kind of arrived at that was a balance between kind of limiting the amount of cost it would take to get something in there, the amount of, I should say, roadway disrupted in order to get something in there, and then balancing kind of that proximity to the site, and then making sure it works. But I hear what you're saying, and I think that's something that we can take a look at and see if there's at least any other way that we can position it along that roadway to see if it's a little bit less intrusive to pedestrians as they cross the sidewalk.
It may be an impossible task. And then I was, I was thinking, okay, so who's using this ramp? It's obviously not a pedestrian crossing, right? It's the vehicle, the Dublin connector, pulling up there. And if I'm in a does it have how do people get on that bus if they're in a wheelchair?
I defer to my friends at the city.
I haven't watched that function yet.
Good evening, members of the commission. J.M. Rayburn. Do you want the address? Okay, got it. Great question, Commissioner Way. The shuttle has a wheelchair ramp, so it would be lowered for the person in the wheelchair to then go onto the ramp, and then it'd be raised up to the shuttle.
And that ramp can't just go down to the curb height and pick people directly up from the curb without having to go down an ADA ramp.
I think it's the way that I understand it is we want the ramp to meet them at the road level rather than the curb, and so there's less possibility that something can go wrong, I guess, if they're boarding or the shuttle.
Okay. I understand the goals here. It just seems like it's a lot of things happening right there where you want to kind of create some, amenity, and it seems to be a little bit disruptive with the bollards and the ramp and everything. So if it was just off to the side, like maybe it eats into that the planted area or something, and it comes in on the side of the shelter. I don't know. I'm just voicing some ideas that maybe you could look at.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So piggybacking on Mr. Schneer's question about the blackboard, can you tell us what the purpose and what the thought behind the blackboard was? And JM, if you're going to field this, or if Ms. Mullinex, if you're going to.
Yeah, happy to. So with the intent of the chalkboard was more of like an interactive and placemaking element that the consultant has proposed for the commission's consideration. But if the commission would like staff and the consultant and applicant to consider other options, we'd be happy to do so.
What did you envision was going to be on the blackboard? I imagine it wasn't just going to be a blackboard all of the time. What types of things did you envision going on there?
I will defer to the consultant because they have the vision behind that idea.
Thank you.
Yes, I can help fill the question. We thought it can be an opportunity to engage with members of the public If the blackboard is not something that's suitable, we also thought of other, I don't want to say like a cabinet for a poster, but I know there was comments last time we were here talking about history and some other elements that we could incorporate. So it's something that could be a sort of a flexible space, if you will. So it could be a blackboard, but it also can be adjusted to be something that's informational or could help share some history. There's suggestions that we could look at some of the early history of Dublin and see how we can incorporate it into the site.
Mr. Schneer.
Yeah, and it's not my intent to micromanage this, but it actually says a chalkboard, which sounds, I said, like Horace Mann, like are we really going to have a black chalkboard and white chalk, which sort of just doesn't seem appropriate for the use. And I'll leave it at that, and you can take that comment and or not. I'm fine either way.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Any other questions? Thank you. Do we have public comment? Anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item? Any public? Thank you. All right, turning over to commission for discussion. Any deliberation needed on the item? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Ms. Beal, if we could clarify, this does have a sixth condition, so we have 5 conditions on the agenda, but we added a sixth. Do we want to broaden? I apologize, and Mr. Boggs, please let me know if I need to do this differently. Just restating that the sixth condition is specific to the chalkboard. However, there was additional discussion that staff and the applicant worked to see if there were any other mitigation needs for the bollards and the ADA accessible location. Mr. Wade, does that cover?
I'm happy with that, working with staff to consider those issues.
Mr. Boggs, seeing as we have a motion on the floor with the 6 conditions and direction to the staff, does the motion sit? Can I call for a roll?
So the 6th condition relates to the blackboard.
To the chalkboard, correct?
Right. Yeah, can you put it on the screen, please?
And then not a condition for approval, but a request from the commission for staff to work with the applicant.
That is fine, since that is not itself a condition of approval. You can proceed with the roll call on the vote on the motion with the 6 conditions.
Thank you. Ms. Beal. Just the first, the amended final development plan at this time.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. I will now entertain a motion for the minor text modification.
So move.
Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Thank you. And we certainly look forward to this item moving forward. It'll be kind of an exciting one and hopefully the first of many. All right, our next item on the agenda is for an informal review. This is the Nutex Micro Hospital at 3800 West Dublin Granville Road, 22-016 INF for an informal review. This application is a request for an informal review and feedback for the construction of a 2-story emergency hospital. The 1.58-acre site is zoned Bridge Street District, Sawmill Center neighborhood, and is located northeast of the intersection of West Dublin Granville Road and Dublin Center Drive. Mr. Hanschel, how are you this evening? Welcome, and I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, Commissioners. Before you tonight is an informal review for the Nutex Emergency Hospital. A brief description regarding the process within Bridge Street District. I feel like we go over this every month, but that's always good to remind ourselves. But the informal review within the Bridge Street District is not a required step. The concept plan is a required step that leads into the preliminary and final development plan stage. The informal review is an opportunity for the applicant to receive non-binding feedback regarding things such as the use, the site layout, the architecture, and sign design. So Should the applicant pursue this site moving forward, a concept plan would be the next stage. Site is highlighted in yellow on the screen. It is located at the intersection of Dublin Granville Road and Dublin Center Drive, and the site is zoned Sawmill Center neighborhood within the Bridge Street district. A bit of background regarding the entirety of the site. So shown on the screen is the entire Fifth Third site, which is 6.7 acres in size. It includes a 30,000 square foot office building and parking lot, and is zoned Sawmill Center neighborhood. Back in October of 2021, this site was before City Council for a final plat, which created two separate lots. One contains the existing office building, and then the other creates the lot that is highlighted in yellow. This plat was approved in October. However, the city is understanding that the plat has yet to be recorded, so this lot is currently not created. However, the intended development that we'll be reviewing tonight would go on this future parcel. So this site is located within the Sawmill Center neighborhood. It is one of the few special neighborhoods within the Bridge Street district that does have its own set of requirements. Bridge Street district does establish neighborhood districts where special attention to location and character of buildings, streets, and open spaces is important to establish a mix of uses that fulfill the objectives of the area plan. Some of these special conditions for this district include encouraging active mixed-use pedestrian-oriented development that encourages interconnected site layouts for pedestrian access. Additionally, you'll see the map that's on the screen for the specific neighborhood, and the star represents the location of the site we're considering tonight. Some of the items that this map considers are areas where a shopping corridor is considered, where specific building types are permitted, as well as potential gateway locations. So you'll see there is a kind of hyphen circle that's located at the intersection of Dublin Center Drive and Dublin Center Drive and West Dublin Granville Road. So this site would be considered for a potential gateway location. Gateway locations are points of identification that lead into a neighborhood. So they are kind of your introduction into an area, a specific area of Dublin. So this can be identified in ways of architecture, landscape, or public open spaces. One area adjacent, well, somewhat adjacent to this is the Chase Bank development located on Banker Drive. They were also responsible for providing a gateway feature if you're looking for any reference for this in the future. And then shown is the street network map for the Bridge Street district. This site is located at the intersection of West Dublin Granville Road and Dublin Center Drive. Both of these are considered principal frontage streets, with West Dublin Granville Road being a corridor connector and Dublin Center Drive being a district connector, as well as Banker Drive to the north, which is an established neighborhood street. Principal frontage streets do require the most emphasis within the district, as they are the highest designation along most of our major corridors. However, when there are two principal frontage streets located adjacent to a site, the higher designated street would require more emphasis. So in this case, it would be West Dublin Granville Road because it is a corridor connector. So the applicant is before you all today to receive informal review of their use, as well as their architecture, conceptual signage, and then site layout. We'll start with the use. The applicant is proposing a micro-emergency hospital. This would fall within the hospital designation within the Bridge Street district, which is considered a conditional use in this zoning area. It does have one use-specific standard regarding the gross floor area. This proposal would not come close to that requirement, so it would fall within the use-specific standard. As stated, this is a conditional use, so future approval of a conditional use would be required with the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is typically done with the preliminary development plan. Should an application pursue to that distance, they would require to meet the conditional use criteria that are listed in the zoning code. A few additional items regarding the use. It is intended to be a 24/7 facility with both inpatient and emergency operations. This would include a number of private beds, treatment rooms, a trauma room, as well as imaging and a central pharmacy that would serve the hospital. Shown on the screen is the conceptual site plan. The building is located at the intersection of West Dublin Granville Road and Dublin Center Drive. Again, that's where both the principal frontage streets do meet. It is a 22,000 square foot emergency hospital that is 2 stories in size max, but a large portion of it is 1 story. The hatched portion of the building on the site is the 2-story, with the rest, the blank white, being the 1-story. The site does have sole access off of Banker Drive, as Dublin Center Drive and West Dublin Granville are principal frontage streets, which eliminates any opportunity for access off of those roads. So it is pushed to the northern property line of Banker Drive. That does lead into a 53-space surface parking lot, which runs down the rear of the property, but also includes a parking wing between the building and Banker Drive. Currently, the site does include 3 potential open space areas. 2 are located south and southeast of the building, and 1 up near the intersection of Banker and Dublin Center. These items would be continued to be discussed and designed as we would get to a final development plan should this application continue to pursue. Additionally, stated earlier, there is a gateway opportunity here, which would be located at the southeast corner of the site and of the building. The applicant has identified this space. However, again, it is purely conceptual at this moment and would need to be further discussed with the applicant. And finally, what also dictates the layout of the site is the proposed building type. The applicant has discussed following the loft building type, and shown below the loft building type are 3 of the requirements. The first is the required build zone, which is shown on the plan. It is that the transparent red-orange space that is not a part of the proposal, is just to show that requirement, as well as there's a 75% front property line coverage along both of the frontages for Dublin Center and West Dublin Granville Road. And then finally, loft buildings do require a minimum 2 stories along the street frontage. A number of these items would need to be continued to be reviewed once this moves forward to a concept plan. And there is always opportunities for waivers in these areas based on what is shown currently, as the building is not pulled up to West Dublin Granville, and part of the RBZ is filled with the open space type, which is permitted. However, the board will be, or the commission will be asked to describe whether the current emphasis on West Dublin Granville Road is sufficient with both the building and the open space. The applicant has provided some conceptual architecture for all 4 elevations, shown on the screen on the north and south elevations. The south elevation is West Dublin Granville Road, so that would be the most emphasized elevation as we would move forward. Again, this is a 2-story massing with a 1-story transition towards the north part of the property. The materials that are chosen would be stone, brick, and a cementous panel. Both the stone and brick are primary materials, with the panels being a secondary material. There will also be aluminum storefront windows and a metal canopy on the east elevation, which currently holds a proposed sign. And shown are some conceptual massing to give you an idea of what this building would look like should it be sited where it currently is. And finally, staff is looking for feedback regarding the signs that are currently proposed. There are 3 wall signs and a potential monument sign, which would be next to the entrance into the building or into the site. The code does allow for 1 wall sign per street frontage, so they would be allowed 3, 1 on each of the frontages, located within the 1st story of the building and a max of 50 square feet each. So currently, what is shown would require a master sign plan. It should be noted that master sign plans are intended to allow applicants an additional degree of flexibility and creativity in their design and display. However, they're not intended to permit larger or more visible signs and are not intended to allow greater number of signs. So the board is asked to provide feedback on what is currently shown. So with that, there are 5 discussion questions that we have for you all today. The first is regarding the conditional use and whether the commission feels that that is an acceptable use within the Bridge Street district at this site. Second is the building siting appropriate given the West Dublin Granville Road priority from a planning and engineering perspective. Is the commission supportive of the proposed parking lot layout? Is the commission supportive of the conceptual massing and materials or architecture of the building? And would the commission support the conceptual height, size, and design of signage on this site? Additionally, if there are any other items that you would like to discuss, we are open to hearing that. Additionally, the applicant is here to answer any questions that you have or address anything that I may not have discussed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hanschel. If the applicant is here, would you like to come up and make a statement? The microphone is now on. Thank you.
Maybe I can talk better with my mask off, if that's okay. John Mills, I'm architect based in Denver. And Zach did a wonderful job of explaining kind of the direction that we've been going. So I'm here to answer questions, to provide a little bit more clarity perhaps, and get your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Looking to the commission now for questions for either staff or the applicant. Mr. Briggs.
What impact is there on the parking of the balance of the property and the use of the adjoining property after this? Is there too much parking, too little parking for the use that's of the bank building?
So you're asking what impact this would have to their parking? To my understanding that the bank currently has more than enough parking than what is permitted in current Bridge Street district. So what would happen with this is the parking wing that is shown on the left side of the screen would be removed with this and then stubbed off. So there would be separate parking for the bank and then for the site.
So the loss of that additional parking for the bank building won't impact its use at all?
No, it will not.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Way.
So I have a related question to that. So when we subdivided this property, there was an issue of a cross lot easement, and that I don't know where that went. This proposal isn't using any kind of cross lot easement. That's one question. So what's the status of that? And the other is the notes reflect that there was stormwater management being handled on this site, and I'm just curious, is it the plan to just put it underground? Does that support this site and the bank site, or just out of curiosity?
So regarding cross-access, I would look to the applicant to discuss, potentially the property owner. And then for stormwater, I would look to Michael Hendershot, who is in attendance for us.
Welcome, Mr. Hendershot.
Good evening. So stormwater management for the site would have to be separate by parcel. So with this development, they'd have to provide their own stormwater management on site. And then the site to the east, or the existing building, and the stormwater management is to the east of the building, so that would be maintained.
Thank you. And then the first question, did you want to repeat that for the applicant?
Yes. So I think we had granted there was a cross lot easement, or that, not granted, but that was part of the language. And I'm just curious, is that something that was considered when you considered the layout for the site?
The cross access was considered, and we did 3 or 4 or 5 different layouts for cross access. And the feedback that we got, I guess really from the staff, was that from discussions with the property owner that was not on the table anymore. So we took it off and we're showing the single access. So that's about all that I know.
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit and help out with this conversation. So yes, so the plat was reviewed by Planning Commission and it went to council and was approved, but then was not recorded due to some concerns from the existing property owner about cross-access and safety concerns about people using and cutting through. So we had some additional discussions between ourselves and the applicant and the property owner to determine a configuration, as it's shown here, to limit access on Dublin Center Drive and 161 and push all the access to Banker so that these parcels operate independently, with then the potential to revisit cross-access should that Fifth Third site ever redevelop. But at this time, the intent is for them to independently operate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Schneer?
I have a question for the applicant and then one for staff. I was a little confused in the applicant's statement, the summary, about the emergency vehicle ambulance access. So it's an emergency hospital. I see that there is a dock for an ambulance, but there was some language that the ambulance sort of wouldn't be used much, so it would be used to transport. And I'm just wondering, it's just a clarification. Do you expect emergency ambulance to transport patients into the hospital, or?
The nature of this type of hospital is more of a community hospital. It will not be part of the EMS network. Okay. So incoming ambulances will go to existing providers at the moment. The ambulance dock, when it is used, and it won't be used very often, is when a patient who has presented at the facility requires some level of care that can't be provided at the facility, and they would be exported to another provider, healthcare provider in the area that can provide that. So there wouldn't be sirens and lights going. It would be just transporting someone who's already stabilized and is being transported somewhere else for a better level of care, or a more.
So though it's denominated as an emergency hospital, the intent would be that patients would be brought by private vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then a question for staff. Given the location, with a clean sheet of paper, what would the sort of highest and best use, if this is a conditional use, with frontage on Dublin, on 161, what would really, what are we looking for that this isn't, that this is sort of a secondary opportunity?
That's a great question. So what staff would be looking at here is making sure we're aligned with the requirements of the Sawmill Center Neighborhood District. So a development that's going to be promoting pedestrian-oriented facilities, that is going to be connecting throughout that area, not just to the street, but how do we get the people from the street throughout the site. So it's hard to say that there's a preferred use here, because we do have a list that is pretty extensive in terms of what is permitted. But ultimately, what's ideal for us and what we plan for is to make sure this is something that aligns with the standards that are in the code.
So if I might quote the code here, and I am in 153.058, section 5. This district applies to the majority of the commercial area located in the east of the district. The standards of the BSD Sawmill Center neighborhood create an active, walkable destination through integration of a strong mix of uses. Development within this district relies on the provision of physical and visual connections, and then I'm going to ... and creates a walkable mixed-use core as the east anchor of the district, and then goes into specific conditions.
So the concern, if there is a concern, is not the use per se, i.e. a hospital, but that it's sort of not, it's not pedestrian friendly, you don't walk to a hospital. Is that fair or unfair characterization?
So I don't want to dive from a staff perspective. I don't really want to dive too much into whether the use makes sense or not. That's part of why we're here, is to see what your thoughts are of this. But ultimately, it is, when we review this, should this move forward, doesn't meet the standards. And then they have to also provide not just the standards of the neighborhood district, but of the conditional use, which also identify, is this consistent with the neighborhood? Is this going to draw away from the area? Is this going to flow with with what's already currently there and the intent of the district. So it's not just the neighborhood standards, it is the conditional use standards, which aren't as, they're also challenging to meet.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Supelak?
Zach, you touched on signage. You went through that quick. Right. The staff report alludes to, help us understand the signage code and what they're asking for, I guess is.
Sure. Just a disclaimer as well, this current signage can very well change. I know you all are well aware of that. So what is allowed per code for a single tenant building is that they are permitted a wall sign on each frontage that they have, up to 50 square feet per sign, and then it has to be on the first story of the building. So in this case, I believe the signs are currently shown on the second story, so the second story addition. So that would not be permitted. It would be required to come down if it were to meet code. They are allowed 3 signs, which they do have. My understanding is that that third sign that's on the east would be required to be on the north along Banker Drive. So to meet the requirements, those changes would have to be made. However, signs are something that do require approval regardless. So even if it does meet those, there are design intents that need to be met as well.
Forgive me, as I was listening, you just said 50 feet per sign, but the language in front of us says 50 total?
Sorry, it's not clear. So it'd be a max of 50 square feet per wall sign.
Okay. The way it's written is, okay, thank you.
And just another caveat to that, it's based on the linear footage of that elevation on that frontage. So the south elevation is very unlikely to be 50 square feet because it is much skinnier than the Dublin Center Drive elevation. So I apologize, that part didn't make it into the presentation, but it would be up to 50 square feet based on the linear square footage of the elevation.
A single sign would be up to 50 square feet,
Correct.
depending, based on proportionate to the side, right? And then just relative to, and we hear you loud and clear, a signage package will have to come in later, but you know what I mean, it's contextual with this design now that it's in front of us. Question about, do we have a sense for, we know we're looking at 3 signs on this, do we have a sense for their scale relative to these counts?
So I don't have dimensions. I can provide elevations which do have these signs. I do think it's safe to say that they would be approaching 50, if not just exceeding it. John, you may have a better understanding of those, but.
Well, if you are able to see the excuse me, the west elevation, the distance between the top of the building and the roof level, basically, which we have for some reason labeled at level 7, that's 8 feet. So if you assume that those big letters, Dublin letters, are 5 feet tall, that sign, the signage that we've got here is probably 50 square feet in the word Dublin. So it would exceed that 50 square foot maximum on that elevation.
Got it, thank you.
And may I add one more comment? My wife tells me I share too much information all the time, but I'm going to do it anyway. For this type of facility that folks don't come to when they decide they want to get a new handbag or a bagel, being able to be identifiable is key, whether they're walking or driving in a vehicle. So that's one reason that these elevations have signs on them. So we're absolutely amenable to scaling them down to be able to fit more comfortably into the fabric of the neighborhood. But I wanted to say that it's key that somebody who needs treatment remembers, oh yeah, that was that building, and can find their way back to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Ray, did you have a question?
So I'm still confused about what this facility is. It says emergency hospital, but you said it's a community hospital. But you don't have ambulances coming, so it's not really emergency. It's people that are coming after there's emergency. Is that right?
No, sir. And I'm sorry, I'm not contradicting you, but except that there are levels or magnitudes of emergency. This will not be a trauma center. It's going to be for bumps and scrapes and breaks and things like that. So that will be a lower scale of emergency. And that's why it's called that's why I refer to it as a community hospital, because it's really to serve the community that's immediately around it. People aren't going to drive from across town here to get with a gunshot wound. So the intent is to provide a better level of emergency service, a broader range of emergency service for those folks who present. And we've got a list of the 15 or so most prominent diagnoses, but it's respiratory, heart issues, things that present, but people don't necessarily need to go. They need to get somewhere to get stabilized. If that.
So who makes that decision? Because you've got a number of hospitals in, okay, so they're being transported from a doctor's office or from?
Well, they could come from a doctor's office.
But you said the physician's making, but if it's an emergency and it's like, you have to make a decision. How do they, why wouldn't they want to go to Dublin Methodist or Mount Carmel's planning to build a new hospital? Why wouldn't they want to go to a major trauma center if they've got something wrong with them?
Well, they likely would if they've got something really major going on. This is one reason to call this an emergency hospital. It's essentially an emergency room on steroids with beds associated with it, so that if someone needs to be monitored or watched longer than the typical 23-hour stay, there's a place for them to stay and to be monitored by the same medical staff that had treated them initially. They don't just treat them and then send them home unless that's appropriate.
So is this just a 23-hour facility, or is it you can stay multiple days?
It operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
But how long can a patient stay in a bed?
The patient can stay for several days,
okay,
if necessary. I'm gonna look over my shoulder here at the physician. Is that accurate? I'm sorry, I have to defer to the expert. I'm an architect. I'll get myself in trouble.
Hi, I'm Mike Borland. I reside here in Columbus at 4318 Lion Drive in Upper Arlington 43220. And I'm part of the operating group with Nutex, and hope to answer your questions. Could you repeat it, please, so I'm making sure I'm correct about it?
I'm just trying to figure out what the role of this particular medical facility is. It says emergency hospital on it, so if I'm got a loved one and I'm trying to take them somewhere, I go, oh, there's the emergency hospital, so I show up. Or are they somehow being sourced here by a medical professional or something because it's a different entry than going to a regular emergency room?
No, it's technically an emergency hospital, meaning that it's staffed by board-certified emergency physicians. It has all the technical capabilities of a typical emergency department, including all the diagnostics and imaging that you would think of. And typically, you'll be seeing patients that really do have a serious problem, but they're seeking a high level of care, emergency care, without sometimes the unfortunate waits that are associated with very large and complicated emergency departments and medical systems. It's not uncommon, obviously, to go to a very large emergency department with a serious problem, to be waiting several hours before you're seen and treated. And the reason that these types of facilities have sprung up to the extent that they have is largely because of the concierge type care that's provided here, the quick turnaround, you're seen within 30 minutes, you're seen by an experienced emergency staff, again, overseen by a board certified emergency physician, and for, for services that don't require surgery, for example, or some other type of referral basis into a very complicated service, these types of emergency facilities, really do serve the consumer in a very effective manner.
So I'm going to ask my question again. So somebody could be admitted here and stay for a couple days, a couple weeks, or is it just in and out type of?
The majority of patients would be seen on an emergency basis and discharged very soon after being seen on that outpatient emergency basis. But they for certain types of services, they certainly can stay in the inpatient facility overnight. Typically, the stays are not much longer than 2 to 3 days under most conditions, which is typical of virtually all hospital admissions and stays these days anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May. Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Other questions? So Zach, one for you. In the code, I am reading a requirement in this particular zone. At least one continuous shopping corridor is required and shall be located along at least one principal frontage street in the approximate location shown later on a figure. One of those is Dublin Granville Road, and just trying to get an explanation, help my brain get around that particular requirement and how this would play into that requirement.
Can you remind me which code section that is again?
Yep, that is page 63 of 153.063C, the neighborhood standards pertaining to the Sawmill Center neighborhood. So subsection 5(2), it appears.
So, to my understanding, I believe that is applying to the shopping corridor that is currently shown on the screen, which runs along Dublin Village Center. Again, that is a general area, and that does run into the shopping center that currently is there. We can certainly identify that and continue to analyze that as we move forward with this.
Thank you. And we can have that discussed at a later meeting. That's fine. Just
Yeah, I mean,
an open question.
it's referring to this graphic, so as the shopping corridor is identified on this particular figure, so the shopping corridor is that pink sort of oval in the middle. So that is not applicable to this particular site. So if the shopping corridor was required, that would be required, like it would include that all the way down to 161, if I'm understanding that graphic correctly.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or for staff at this time? All right, thank you. I don't know if there's any public comment on this particular, yes, there is. Is anyone from the public, or have we received any public comment from the online stream?
We have not.
Okay. All right, we will enter into deliberation. Mr. Henschel, if I could have you put the discussion questions back up on the screen. For the commission's review, those 5 items we are asked to consider, please note that I don't see. Typically, a number 6 would be listed with any other considerations, but if you could review those, and then we will start with Mr. Schneer.
I'm still, there's a couple things that I'm concerned, confused about. When I was reviewing this, is this the highest priority? Dublin Granville Road is the highest priority street. So if not this, then what? And we don't want to settle for a suboptimal use, but hospitals are generally pretty good uses, and I won't it's not my province, and I don't think it's our province to determine the density. I mean, I think that's a business decision. Do we have too many hospitals? That's my personal opinion. It's not for us to judge whether we have too many. That's a business decision. But should it be a hospital there, or should it be something else? And unless somebody can share an observation about some pedestrian-oriented use that might happen on Dublin Granville Road, which is not the most pedestrian-friendly street we have, then I would support a conditional use for a hospital. The other observation, which would probably come as number 6, other, I think we're sort of struggling with this business model, which is not, again, our concern per se, but as sort of stewards of the public. I'm thinking about signage and emergency, and it will take some work to say, you should come here if you have this issue, but don't come here if you have this issue. Go to Dublin Methodist or somewhere else. And again, I assume that the applicant has done this before, and this is not a case of first impression about how you make that delineation, but that's more of an observation as it might relate to signage down the road. So I support this use conditionally. Maybe conditionally is not the best choice of words, but I support this use unless there's some overriding reason why we don't want a hospital on that location. With respect to the other issues, that's the dilemma of where we are in this sort of the process. The applicant wants feedback, and we just have some pretty cool colored sketches sort of thing. So I really don't feel comfortable opining with respect to massing and materials. I mean, the sketches look fine. I am okay with the height and size generally, so I guess that's massing. And I defer any feedback on signage at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Way?
Thank you. Again, I'm really struggling with this as a use in the Bridge Street District and along 161 specifically. I think we've talked a lot about the types of uses that we want to see there that make that a very walkable environment. I don't see this particular use really contributing to that. I have, there's a question about parking lot layout. I don't think dead-end parking lots are very functional. And that's why I was asking about the cross-lot easement, whether that would give a relief valve. But from a functionality standpoint, I'm still thinking, as this is a named emergency hospital, and somebody looking for a hospital and saying, oh, that's where I need to go, so people are going to show up here. And, the ability to get in and parked, and, dead-end parking lots are very difficult for people to navigate. So I think just from that standpoint, I think I have some struggles. I also think that, again, not giving the priority to Dublin Granville Road is kind of that key frontage, and giving up, partially up to parking. I know there's green space there, but I'd like to see more emphasis put on that frontage, and maybe the whole building kind of comes closer to the street, and there's more parking in the back. Again, I think that could be looked at. I think the conceptual massing and materials are fine, and the height, size, I guess, I think that's fitting into the things that we're seeing happening along the street. But I just feel like the use itself, I think a hospital in this area, to me, doesn't contribute to the spirit of the Bridge Street District and that walkable kind of active environment. It seems like it's a very destination-oriented use, and that people will come there and be served well medically, but they're not going to really take advantage of it as being that environment that we want to create.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Grimes?
Thank you. Yeah, I tend to agree that I'm not really sure this is the best thing to be put in that spot. I don't like the canyon parking lot either. I think that doesn't permit very good flow from access. You know, people coming from the east, they're going to wrap around the building and come back in the back end. I mean, I know that the signage is going to be have to be very specific in order to get people into this building. As far as it on the frontage, you know, how does it blend in with the building next door, and how will that flow together? I'm not really getting that either. Massing materials, as Mr. Schneer mentioned, you know, it's pretty plain vanilla right now. I can't quite make judgments on a lot of that with what limited information is presented. So I don't know, it's just doesn't seem quite well developed yet for that location. That's about the gist of what I think.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Supalack.
I'm going to echo many of my fellow commissioners. The use is worrisome, specifically not because the site isn't cultivated in a pedestrian-friendly way potentially, but because the use is not a pedestrian destination. And so that does not sort of marry well with the overarching intent of the district. If I'm just working through the questions, right, the siting is actually in large part appropriate, pushing towards the corner relative to what we're doing. That's generally good. If we're saying the massing is in large part, it's not a bad design in and of itself. I will say it doesn't, even if we're pushing towards the corner, there's still that gateway sort of language that is going to be critical, especially on 161. So that aspect, I think, is absent in the current design. Materials are reasonable and agreeable in all this. I will say I was hoping I was going to get an answer, too, on the sort of signage scale. And again, we're all really early on that, but I worried relative to what I was seeing, right, even just based on the drawings, that these are sizable signs to the point of they're 3 feet tall, right, and then they're considerably long. And when you start to run that math, it becomes like a 5x of what our signage standard is on this site, which suddenly, right, reduce all those signs by 1/5. It's just a very different experience as well. And so that's wherein the architecture and the signage and all that stuff is, I think, a little bit sort of out of kilter across the board. Again, none of that, you know, I'm trying to be gracious and go through all the questions, but none of that really sort of, most of that is still problematic if the use isn't even agreeable to begin with. So that's continuing to be where I'm at. I don't know, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. So we're looking at this particular item in this particular location. I think if we were talking a different location, we'd be having a very, very different discussion. So the use is something that we see Dublin residents would have use of. This type of facility is, as described, to me, it kind of seems the step up from the urgent care and the step down from the 4-hour wait in the emergency room in a traditional hospital. So with that being said, we're asked to look at the conditional use on this particular property, and our conditional use qualifications in this particular zone call that something needs to be harmonious with the general objectives of our community plan. And I think what you're hearing from the commission is we don't think it's harmonious with the community plan and with the zoning in this area. Also, that it complies with applicable development standards. You've heard some concern on the circulation within the parking lot, and then, of course, the scale of the signage, which, you know, to the applicant's earlier points, signage is critical. No pun intended there, but signage is necessary for this type of facility. The condition number 3 in our conditional use qualifications is harmonious. We use that word again with the existing and intended character. Condition number 4 is not have a negative impact on existing or future facilities and neighborhood structure. And we continue to go down. There's actually one that talks about hours of operation, and where this is an emergency room hospital, that it be harmonious with, well, I think a hospital and a bank are kind of exactly the opposite. Plays very, very well to shared use agreements, shared parking agreements, but not too harmonious with the existing character or the sought character for this community plan. However, Dublin's a big city, so I would encourage you to look at other options, other areas within the city, because I'm sure that you'd find something, and we all know that the Dublin residents are pretty fantastic to be around. So looking to the applicant, do you have any questions or seek any clarification from the commission on this informal review this evening? Yes, please. Welcome back, Mr. Rowland.
Is it on now?
It's on now. Thank you.
The use is a really important question, and the character of the facility and what it's attracting and how it's performing for the consumer, I think is maybe is really what you're asking, and then how it relates to the character of the district itself and the neighborhood and where you want to go with that. You know, medical services, particularly emergency services, are really changing, and the consumers are seeking a different type of facility than they used to seek. It's one thing to be terribly sick. You're picked up by an ambulance and you're taken to Riverside and you need surgery immediately, or Dublin Methodist, you need surgery immediately, and you spend 3 or 4 days with a terrible heart attack of some kind, and you need a stent placed, you need other surgery, and that's a different matter. What we're seeing in the majority of emergency services these days is a consumer desire to be treated quickly for a problem they can't quite figure out. It's why they don't go to the urgent care. That's why they seek emergency services, because they don't know what's wrong with them. Yet, they're not in a situation necessarily where they're going to be picked up by EMS and taken immediately to a big hospital for a surgical problem. These facilities are friendly, and they're smaller, and they're easier to get into and easier to be seen and easier to get out of. Admittedly, you're going to be arriving by either private vehicle or an ambulance of some kind. Patients aren't going to be walking up to this, but those visitors and relatives of those that are being seen at this type of facility, they will interact with the neighborhood and interact with shopping and the rest of it. And it's in my mind, it's a completely compatible neighborhood use.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Any final comments from the commission, Mr. Way?
Yeah, I just want to echo some points you made, Ms. Call, earlier about, I understand the role of a micro-hospital or a freestanding ED. I'm involved with those every day, and I realize, then changing healthcare, yes, keep people out of the acute care hospitals and give them opportunities for facilities like this. I think my problem is wrong location. And because of what we're trying to achieve here with the Bridge Street District, my experience with facilities like this, it's about convenience, access, getting people in and out conveniently. It's automobile oriented. It's not about people walking to get there. And I think maybe there's another site in Dublin that you can find that may be more appropriate. But I think this site, I'm just challenged by this site with all of the efforts of the city and this commission of trying to make this corridor something that's really unique and different. And so I just wanted to say that I know exactly what you're trying to achieve here from a medical standpoint, and I think it is where things are going. So I don't want you to be discouraged by our comments, but this site just has a lot of challenges. One, the size of it, and trying to put a lot of stuff on a small site, I think is something that you're facing. So
Thank you for your candor, though. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I believe Mr. Way summed it up, as well as, the rest of the commission. I saw head nods as he was speaking. And so thank you very much for your time this evening. And again, we encourage you to look at other sites within the city. I think the use is valuable. So thank you for your time this evening. Seeing as that's an informal review, we do not have any action items to take on that. Did we receive any public comment? Thank you. All right, moving on in our agenda, we are moving to item 2, 5055 Upper Metro Place, 21-094 INF for an informal review. This application is a request for an informal review and feedback for the construction of a 4-story mixed-use building containing residential units and a commercial tenant space. The 2.55-acre site is zoned Bridge Street District Commercial and is located southwest of the intersection of Upper Metro Place with France Road. And Ms. Noble, welcome. It's good to see you again. I will turn the time over to you for our case presentation.
Thank you very much. This evening, I am presenting a case for 5055 Upper Metro Place. This is an informal review similar to the presentation that the commission just heard. This presentation was originally presented to the commission in July of last year, and this is the second option for the Planning Commission to review the applicant's proposal. Just a reminder of where we are in the process. Again, this is the earliest portion of our review process. This is an informal review, which means it's a non-binding feedback from the commission. Should the application proceed, it would then go to a concept plan, which is a formal application before the Planning and Zoning Commission. The site before the commission this evening is a 2.5-acre tract of land. It's primarily vacant. It does have frontage along Upper Metro Place and France Road. The site is zoned a Bridge Street District Commercial, and it is surrounded by primarily hotel uses. You can see Embassy Suites, Home 2 Suites to the north. The most recent proposal that the commission has reviewed is Towns Place Suites, which is to the west. To the south, there are an office building and a bank use, and to the east, there are other hotel uses. In the original discussion that the Planning and Zoning Commission had in July, we did talk about the site. It is located in the Bridge Street District, but it is also located within an area called the Dublin Corporate Area Plan. So we did talk about the elements of both of those two plans, and they do have similar concepts between the two. Particularly within the Bridge Street District, we're trying to promote a walkable and mixed-use urban environment. With the Dublin Corporate Area Plan, we're actually encouraging the same. Specifically, we're trying to attract amenities for workers in the area. That's been a primary loss in that particular area at this point. We are also focusing on open space as not only an amenity to the area, but a usable amenity to the area. And that's particularly important in this area because it's void of any type of open space. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then specifically with DCAP, we are talking about infill development. It is a fully developed area, and we are dealing with sites that will add to the surrounding area. So just a brief recap of what the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed in July. It is similar in terms of numbers, I'll say. The design has been changed, but originally in July, the applicant was proposing a 4-story building. It was a mixed-use building with commercial uses on the first floor and residential uses on the second to the fourth floor. The building was primarily located along Upper Metro Place and then descended along France Road. It did include approximately 13,500 square feet of commercial space. And I will say that the applicant did include that commercial space as some of the comments that planning had made with the original analysis of the site. We wanted to, again, create that mixed-use environment for the site, and we also wanted to ensure that it did correlate with the surrounding uses. So the applicant was kind enough to make those adjustments prior to even coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission in July. The parking was quite similar to what you'll see tonight. It was a total of 205 parking spaces, and that does include a mixture of parking. It includes an underground parking facility, a surface parking, and it did include on-street parking. When the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the case, they were generally supportive of the use, which was a question that we posed, obviously, to the forefront of that discussion. They did express, or you expressed some concerns about the massing that was primarily located along Upper Metro. Again, that was a very long linear wall, 4 stories in height and very close to the road, so that did pose some concerns to the commission. The open space was primarily located to the rear of the building, so there was some concern that that would be perceived as private space and not necessarily even viable to the public or usable to the public. We did briefly talk about on-street parking. The general consent was we just wanted to explore that a little bit more and talk about what that meant to the site. The Planning Commission did want to ensure that the Dublin Corporate Area Plan was utilized as part of our review in this particular site, and you expressed waivers as a possible consideration if it helped aid in the design of the site. So as a reflection of what the Planning and Zoning Commission had stated, the applicant has primarily addressed the massing of the building. And if you see, I'm just going to refer to them as the Upper Metro building that's located along the frontage of Upper Metro, and the France Road building, which is further to the south. They basically have dissected the building, provided a connector. So it is a singular building, but it appears and operates as if it were 2 buildings. The parking is primarily, again, provided by underground parking. There is a surface parking lot to the south of the Upper Metro building. They are still proposing on-street parking, approximately 17 spaces. The open space that you'll see is located north of the France Road building, so it is more visible, which was a highly recommended modification to the plan. That open space does include a private pool that is exclusive to the residents of this building, and it also includes an outdoor patio space that will be used as part of the commercial operations on the first floor of the France Road building. And generally speaking, the commercial uses have been reduced primarily in half, and will be exclusively in a portion of the France Road building. Those uses, just as a reminder, still remain the same as originally proposed, but as a reminder to the commission, it will include a restaurant, a fitness facility that will be open both to the residents and the public, and conference spaces that will help with the hotel uses. If there's a void or a need for more conference spaces, that those will be available in this particular building. In terms of units, they've increased the unit count by 1, so a total of 175 residential units, primarily studio apartments, and the total parking that's going to be provided on site is 208 spaces. Open space was a significant conversation for the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as, of course, staff. Again, this is an important amenity, particularly in this particular portion of Dublin, which we don't have anything in close proximity to the site. We not only wanted to talk about the quantity of open space, but the quality of open space. So we'll start with quantity first. The Bridge Street District has open space requirements for both residential and commercial uses. And at the numbers and density that the applicant's proposing, they're required slightly above 35,000 square feet of open space. Just to highlight the scale of that, that's almost a full acre of space for a 2.5 acre site, so that's a sizable amount of open space. The applicant has been working diligently to provide as much open space as they can. In their current proposal, they're slightly under the open space requirement. And we will continue to work with them to, of course, maximize that. But then to talk about the type of open space that the applicant's proposing, again, there is green space in this kind of inner corridor of the site. Everything around the pool is open to the public. There is landscaping that will be provided along Upper Metro Place. Again, there's a patio that's going to complement the residential use that's inside, along with seating. And just as a reminder, the pool is a private use that will not be open to the public. In terms of general concepts that are important not only to the Bridge Street District, but for the DCAP plan, is just activating the space and the site to the surrounding area, and some elements that we wanted to highlight that we think add some merits to this particular application. Again, open space, public seating. They did include the ground floor commercial to provide a mixed-use environment for the site. There's on-street parking that will allow for people to interact in and out of the site easily, and the prominent location of the entrance of the building, all to activate the site in and around the surrounding areas. In terms of circulation and parking, this is equally an important conversation. The primary access to the site is off of Upper Metro Place. You can see the red arrows kind of generally taking you in the site through the garage that's underneath the France Road building, and then they would exit back out in the same manner. The surface parking area is just slightly to the south, providing 53 spaces. The underground parking facility will provide approximately 138 spaces, and the on-street parking equates to 17 spaces. In terms of requirements for this particular site, we don't have enough information to say that they're required X number of spaces. We've tried to analyze what we think could be a viable mix of uses that would allow for these parking spaces. It's easier if I just show you. So again, this is just us summarizing what we think could be viable numbers to accommodate the parking that they're allowing. They have not told us the type of units that they're going to have. They have said that it's primarily studio apartments. So in the first scenario, the first line, if this were, let's just say 100% studio apartments, they would be required 1 space per unit, which would equate to 175 spaces. So that would be ideal for the parking counts, right? If they were to conceptually use all of the parking strictly for the residential uses, they would have to provide 1.2 spaces per unit, and then their maximum count that they would be allowed under the Bridge Street Code would be 218 spaces. So again, this is just conceptually trying to allow the commission to see where we are with the parking that they're proposing. Now, having said that, there is a commercial component to it. So we've taken that ideal scenario, the 100% studio apartments, and we've said basically what would be left for the commercial uses. That would allow 33 spaces dedicated to the commercial operations. So because a restaurant use is the predominant of their commercial uses, that requires 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So that would incorporate, if they were to have 33 spaces, that's going to get you around 3,000, 4,000 square feet, which is fairly close to what they've described as their operational needs for the site. So again, just to give you some ideas of what we're dealing with in terms of parking. Architectural character for the area, this hasn't changed very much, and quite frankly, it wasn't a huge discussion at the original meeting, but if you, just to get an idea of what they're proposing, there is interesting elevation changes, not only to the roof line, but to the exterior of the building. It's not singularly aligned with the roadway. There is fluctuation in the building. The material choices are natural material choices with some more modern choices. Many of the units along the roadways have balconies, which provide some activity along the building forefront. And you can see that there's a nice use of window space for all of the units. And this is just showing you elevations as we're looking from Upper Metro into the site. And the far right corner is the rear of the building. So the discussion questions that we would like to pose to the Planning and Zoning Commission, first and foremost, do you support the modified site design that the applicant's proposing? Is the commission supportive of the open space design, location, and layout? If the applicant were to proceed with a formal application, would they support a parking waiver to the, a parking plan associated with the applicant's request? Is the commission supportive of the conceptual mass, scale, and height of the building? And of course, any other considerations that the Planning Commission would have. So with that, I would love to answer any questions that you have. I know the applicant and their team are here equally to address any questions that the commission has. And I would love your feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Noble. Looking for questions just for staff at this point in time from the commission. Mr. Schneer.
Tammy, the open space requirement is, just so I'm clear, it's total, the open space requirement and the public use are different calculations. So the public use is a subset and it doesn't, there's not a metric for that. Is that correct?
I would say yes.
So
there's a numeric value to the open space, I think.
So just for clarification, open space is public open space.
that was
That's
the
the
question.
requirement.
And there is a numeric quantity to that, yes.
Can you go back to that one? Yeah, let's,
Oops.
maybe it's this one. Okay, required open space, 35,000. Is that open space that is publicly accessible?
No, it's a total open space requirement.
Ms. Roush, can you clarify there?
So the required open space is required to be publicly accessible. So the required number that's on here, unless you're saying differently, right? So 35,152 square feet is required public open space.
Okay, so.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay,
Lots of public.
so that being the case, and they're 9% shy of that, so that calculation of of the plus or minus 32,000 obviously does not include the pool.
Right, correct.
Because that's not accessible. Okay, I mean, just point of clarification. And then following up on that, hard to tell from this drawing what parts of this drawing are not open to the public and how would that be? I mean, a pool's going to have a fence and a gate presumably. Is that, if I'm looking at that, I see a lot of green and I see some sidewalks and et cetera. Should we assume that everything other than the aqua blue will be publicly accessible?
So yes, the pool area is not open to the public. So not just the pool itself, but I'm sure there's a space around the pool where there's
Right, the
activities.
deck, the pool deck, whatever.
Yep.
So just for clarification, Ms. Noble, do we have a graphic that delineates what on the image that we're looking at right now is qualified in that calculation of 32,000 plus or minus square feet?
Like if you were to do an overlay.
Yeah, we don't. I'm sorry, we don't have that kind of detail.
We do in our drawings.
We do?
at least in the printed version. Looks like this.
Okay.
Quick question while on the
Yeah,
same
go ahead.
subject matter, while he finds his way there, just to be sure. The open space calculation, can you help us understand that real quick? Not the count, but again, to the point of the density, just want to understand the relationship of the density and adding the units and how that drives that number.
Okay.
It's downloading.
So there's open space requirements, specifically 200 square feet per unit. So as the units increase, the open space increases, and then the commercial space is based on square footage. And honestly, the commercial space is fairly minor. The residential units are basically 35,000 square feet. So 154 square feet is commercial.
Are you caught up, Lance? Can I keep going?
I'm good.
Question on the parking calculation. I know we did parking calculation for the residential units, at least as we currently understand that array. Question about, you touched on, oh, there you go. I guess I missed, we might have glossed over that real quick. Is that, so your spaces per 1,000 square feet, it looks like it's 8,000 square feet of commercial space.
It's actually 7,700.
Just under. But does that, I mean, obviously, if that's a potential restaurant, right?
Right.
Is that still commensurate with the restaurant calculation for that space? Or is it?
So this 7,700 square feet will incorporate all three of those uses: the restaurant, fitness center, and conference rooms. We don't have any type of breakdown of what that space looks like, so that'll be the kind of the next step, if you will.
But to extrapolate that a little bit, so that 7,700 square feet, if it were all, let's say, it changed, and it all went restaurant, which is the highest parking count as required.
Right.
Then we would need, what, 77 spaces?
Yep.
And is that calculated in our parking counts? How did we land on this particular, we think?
So your calculations were correct. I don't know if I understood the last part of that question.
So here we have 33 parking spaces remaining. Is that just taking the count that's on the plan, subtracting out the perceived residential requirement?
Yes.
And then this residual?
Yes.
So looking at this, no more than 3/7 of that space that is commercial could be the highest?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was the primary point of us doing this exercise, is to kind of, I mean, we are.
Understood. It's a working calculation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other questions for staff?
I think I've asked this before, but I'm going to ask it again because I forgot what the answer was. What is the little bit of notch out of the property along Franz Road? Is that some kind of a utility or something that's?
Notch.
It's right on Franz Road. It shows up.
Oh,
It shows
yeah.
up in.
Which
Southeast corner.
page, Mr. Way? Which
It shows
page?
up in the open space fire access diagram. That'd be the clearest, I guess. And maybe this is a question for the applicant. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that myself. I don't, are you talking about right by the north arrow, that little?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the reason I'm asking is it's causing,
Odd.
it may be causing the building to be shaped a certain way because it's trying to
Yeah,
modulate the setback along France based on ownership. So
yeah, I'll let the applicant.
I'll wait for the applicant then, sorry.
Question about, how about this? The right now we have a residential building rising, and it's in close proximity to the parcel on the south.
400 North Metro Place.
Yeah, 400 North Metro Place. Is there, because I guess I'm trying to understand, so that adjacency, right? Right now, that's a parking lot. It's got some greenery around it, but there's a big, tall building of residential units with windows facing that. What happens when those parcels potentially decide to do a similar thing and put up a wall of a building nearby? Are we, and maybe it's a side setback kind of conversation. Maybe it's just I'm just trying to understand what future sensitivity we might have to have there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to approach that. I mean, again, the idea is that we start to look at these sites more integrated to one another. So I mean, that's certainly, unfortunately, not how the sites exist today. So we're moving in that direction. So I would hope and anticipate that we would continue that desire.
Just for clarification, if that site ever were to redevelop, we would see it back.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is there any, maybe the question is there any reason the adjacent site couldn't do a similar thing? So we basically have two residential walls of windows staring at each other.
Short of this planning commission seeing that site and modifying it accordingly.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff at this time? All right, welcome. I'll invite you up to the microphone if you'd like to make a statement. Otherwise, we can jump into questions from the commission.
Thank you. See you again.
Could I have you turn your microphone on? Thank you.
Watch everybody do that all night long and didn't get it. Dwight McCabe, 7361 Courier Road, Plain City, Ohio. So we'll hope to be brief. Certainly appreciate your time tonight, and we're thrilled to be back with you. It's been a long time. We haven't been sitting on our hands. I hope you're going to recognize that we did our diligence to hear you when we were here the last time. And our takeaway from our discussions past time is we feel like we have come to a better solution. We think your comments actually were quite appropriate. And as you recall the last time, some of the things we were struggling with were the kind of dichotomy between the various overlays and the various zoning conditions that are in place here. And we didn't disagree at all. We were just trying to meet the ordinance as stated. And so certainly didn't disagree that the Great Wall of building along Upper Metro Place probably wasn't the right answer. A couple of quick things I wanted to answer some of your questions having to do with the open space. Kind of subsequent to the submittal, we've had ongoing dialogue with staff and with the fire marshal. And so some of your questions about the building on the south side and how that kind of works with the neighbor, how fire access works, all that's actually been resolved in terms of getting a fire truck in the back parking lot close to the building, getting a fire truck on France Road. And between those two, we've worked out the hose lay distance and all that. The reason I bring that up is the plan you're seeing still anticipated a full 20-foot fire lane easement on the south side, which is no longer a requirement. So what will happen is that building, where it has some offsetting in it on the south side, will actually shift back to align with the rest of the building on the south side. And once that happens, that green space now goes to the front of the building again. So the actual number, and I have it right here in front of me, we made a kind of a submittal last night on that. Our actual number of that public open space, we exceed the minimum requirement. So just from a conversational point of view, we never thought we'd get there, but we have. And so you're correct that that number is exclusive of the pool area and the pool deck. So we did meet that. From a parking count point of view, I want to clarify that. So the basic unit type in these buildings is a full one-bedroom unit. So we're not looking at studios. We're looking at one bedrooms. There's somewhere around I think they're between 670 and like 690 square feet per unit. It's a pretty optimal unit. It's a unit that actually has been being put in place around town in the downtown area and a lot. And it's a terrific unit. It's just the right size. So that's the fundamental basis. We may add some 2-bedroom units kind of at the ends. If we do that, that's actually going to consume unit counts and effectively will reduce our parking count, not increase our parking count. So we've taken the worst case in terms of the unit mix as all 1-bedrooms. The other thing, to clarify the parking of the commercial space, and again, kind of, looking at answering questions last minute. So we certainly don't expect to build a 7,700 square foot restaurant on this location. We wouldn't want one in the first place. Second place, we just don't see that trying to accommodate that parking on this site makes any sense at all. So what we'll do is limit that to probably a 3,500 square foot kind of bar/restaurant. And we talked the last time a little bit about the idea of the goat. If any of you get down to Hilliard and see the goat that's down there, have that in mind. That's kind of the vision. That's what we would see. We actually have an operator that operates that kind of space that's working with us now and is really excited about this location. So what we were doing was kind of backing into that and saying, if that were the case, then at least by code, it says we should have 35 parking spaces. The other 2 uses are complementary to what happens in the immediate vicinity. So we would expect people to come here from, say, other hotels or there's some apartments that are across the way down the street a bit. Those are going to be the primary users of the fitness facility. We don't see people really driving to this part of Dublin just for that functionality. And then likewise, the meeting type spaces, again, we tend to see local, we tend to see overflow. The other hotels in the area have expressed that need, particularly the hotel on our site definitely has that need, and there's common ownership between that hotel and this project. So so in terms of the spirit of parking, when you're building places like this and you promote walkability, what that's saying is you should be commensurately less needy of parking. And in this location where you do have lots of folks that are going to be staying overnight in the vicinity, this gives them a place to get out of their hotel and come and have some outdoor experience and have a kind of a bar restaurant experience. So we're feeling like the parking pressure is minimal when this is all said and done. We've also had some kind of last minute conversations about the idea of the on-street parking, and and what I've heard from Tammy earlier today is the possibility that maybe staff revisits the whole thing and says, if we're going to have a Bridge Street here, maybe we should change the character of the whole street and actually do parking on both sides of the street and make it a true Bridge Street type experience there. So that's in the discussion, and we'll see where that goes. The proximity to the south, I guess how I would maybe address that today is from a building code point of view and from a property line setback, at least what this property is entitled to. We're going to use that and work with that on our property today. If there's ever redevelopment in the future, which who knows if any of us are around by then, because you've got a bank that actually intends to be there for a long time. We've had a lot of dialogue with the management group that operates the office building to the south. It's actually a Canadian group that owns it. They don't have any aspirations of going anywhere anytime soon or redeveloping, and they actually love the idea of what we're putting here. So we're putting a connector walkway that gets over to those uses so you can get a direct access off their parking. So again, I don't know that there's an immediate concern of that. Long term, yeah, if somebody wanted to do something similar right next door, I'm sure you'd have to talk about that at that point. So we could talk all night, don't want to do that, but certainly here to get your impressions. Again, we feel a whole lot better about this proposal. And I would tell you from an architectural point of view, this is still not an architectural presentation. This is simply these things fit and work, and all the units would have balconies, all the units would have a lot of glass. We're high on getting people out of their units, out in the sunshine, whether it's on their own balcony or down on the ground level. And
thank you, Mr.
That's our
McCabe.
proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking to the commission for questions for the applicant. Mr. Way.
Thanks for the presentation, the discussion. Yeah, this has really come a long way. It's really shaping up. So just to be clear, you're only parking under the France Road building, is that correct?
No, the whole thing is parked.
I thought I heard, okay, so the whole thing is parking. Great.
Yes.
Perfect. That clarified that. And I'll go back and ask my question again. That little notch on Franz Road that's not part of your property, is that?
It's not part of our property, and I don't think any of us have walked out there to really figure out why that's the case. But if there's an opportunity to pick that up and clean that up, we'll take it. Yeah.
Mr. Hendershot, did you have some insight into that notch?
Yeah, so that's actually, there's private utilities in that area. I think it's either electrical or telephone. So if you look at kind of a street view of it, there's like a green enclosure. So that's why the right of way is notched out for those facilities. And I think that goes back to like the late 90s.
Is that a no-fly zone?
I don't.
We can't touch it, right? It's a
I think
utility
that would
that's
be
not
very
going
challenging to relocate those facilities. It's pretty expansive in that area.
Thank you.
It actually, the stone wall actually runs right through it. So when you go out there and look at it today, it all works together. It's not just isolated kind of utility zone.
Yeah, again, there's been a lot of discussion about the future of Franz Road and the whole Metro Center, and thinking of Franz Road, as kind of more of an active kind of space. Mm-hmm. And I know you've got activity out there, but it's set back from the road. I'm trying to get things closer, more active. So I think, that's a discussion. I think the stone wall is there. Is that correct?
It is.
Yeah, yes. I think that's a distraction to actually achieving the France Road activity, because it's like a barrier. It says, don't come here, right? So that's another discussion we'll have to have.
We agree with you. We'd like to loosen that up too.
The other question I had for you was the infamous swimming pool, which is like eroding away, the open space numbers. But had you considered moving the swimming pool to different locations from where you have it?
We have looked at that ad nauseum. From a practical point of view, a pool being on a southwest corner in central Ohio is where you really want it to be.
Yeah.
The reason it's positioned out as far as it is when you look at this in midsummer, it gets a lot of sun out until late in the evening. As soon as you start talking about putting it to that southwest, now it's a significant impact on the parking, not just from a surface parking point of view, but how do you now access the underground parking, and it gets to be really disruptive. The other side of this is it's back to the idea of the experience of folks coming here. One of the feature sets of the GOATs is, in fact, to not be able to step into that activity, but to see that activity. And it's a consequential thing. You've all been to those.
It's a kind of I think 50% of the people might enjoy it. Other people might be kind of offended by that activity. And I know that's an issue at some GOATs too.
Yeah.
So,
and we intend to, we can work to the right solution there in terms of opacity and kind of separation. If it need be, you simply put up an 8-foot brick wall all the way around and be done with it. And then it doesn't impact at all the public space. But our preference is to actually make it more interactive.
It is very disruptive because it's in the center of the open space, so it then fragments the open space in terms of, the size. If you could push it up against the building to the west and then free up more of that land,
we could do that.
Just a comment.
Yep, we could do that.
That's all for now.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much.
Great.
Now, Mr. Grimes, could I have you start us off with deliberation? Prior to that, however, any public comment? Is anyone here from the public wishing to make comments on this application? Seeing none, Mr. Grimes.
I think this is far superior to what was presented before. I like it a lot. I'm really impressed with the changes and the layout. And I think a lot of your comments today have addressed my concerns, whether it's parking or around the edges of the building. So I don't have any problems with it whatsoever. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Supalak.
I'm going to continue to support the use here, just as a fundamental sort of front end on all of it. I don't know that we actually reduced, right? Some of the commentary previously was concerned about reducing the mass. I don't know that we reduced the mass in general, but we broke it up in a sort of interesting way that sort of got us some really nice positives out of all that. How about this? The open space is rather interesting. I actually applaud, pool aside, I actually applaud a lot of the things you're doing, right? That corner is inviting and compelling. I know you don't know what the sort of totem is there, but it's an interesting piece, right? And I could imagine, right? The goats are actually, I like going to the goats. So all of that and the ability for the goat to sort of spill out somehow onto these plazas is really a neat thing. And of course, I think the goat is an interesting model in and of itself, in that it becomes the local cantina for all these people, right? So it becomes a self-sustaining thing, and you kind of touched on it. We don't need, it doesn't necessarily hinge on vehicular traffic. Now, if I wanted to visit there, I'd have to drive, and that's an interesting conundrum in and of itself on this site. What I struggle with, so again, there's a lot of good moves there. What I struggle with, and I think my fellow commissioner, Mr. Way, is sort of searching for it. On the plan, we've blocked off all this open space, and it's just public open space, and right. The question becomes, what's the quality of it? Does the public actually participate there, or does it really? Right, the broader public, not just your public, if you will. Do they participate there, or how do they not, type of thing, right? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'd like to see the outside public be drawn more in, regardless of the pool and whatever sort of the pool is going to make intuitively sense if any of us walk up there. Yeah, that's for them. That's not for me. But it's still worrisome in the way this is sort of encased in the space, and the way I only have a finite, maybe I only have a finite few ways up, right? I'm not necessarily invited to go up there. It still feels it's got a public-private kind of aspect to it. So that, I don't know how you solve that necessarily, but I would encourage continued exploration of that relative to the pool, relative to the space, relative to the sort of platforming up there. How am I potentially drawn in? I don't know also relative to sort of the access to the goat in particular, whatever that is. Would we ever consider sort of angled nose-in parking here or not? Because there's a certain amount of, there's space to be had there. The street is not terribly, it's not highly trafficked. It feels like it could potentially incur some of that. And then therein you do gain access to, right, some of that more outside community coming up, right? So some of those moves I think are important to consider and just evaluate. And I'm not averse to the pool potentially staying with where it is if it starts to make sense relative to some of that. And I think the broader public is drawn up there, right? So we get to sit on the plaza, not just the residents, you know what I mean, type of thing. I know I articulated a concern about the wall of residential units. Again, we all recognize that's a future potential issue, right? Given the next series of projects that come along, I don't know that it is problematic or a stop for this project as much as, perhaps I wanted to articulate it so that we collectively recognize it at this point and, you know what I mean, sort of put a stake in the ground on it one way or another. I'm a little worried your back lot is tight. It'll be one of those uncomfortable lots. Food for thought when the parking calculations sort of shake out and or some of these adjustments in the units shake out and or the angled parking shakes out. Obviously, whenever any of us find those really sort of tight lots, it's unpleasant, and I would advocate for trying to relax that a little bit. Forgive me, my notes are all across a variety of pages. Generally, I'll say the architecture, I think you're going in a good direction. Obviously, it's early, it'll sort of go there. Some of the stuff, the totem, I touched on it. Again, I don't know what you're planning there, but there is, right. But there is something to that even, and where I'm going is relative to drawing up the public is you have one totem on the corner, but is there something about a series of totems, or how do they interact with the space, or whatever that element is, that could be part of the cards you hold in your hand for sort of helping the broader public, you know what I mean, be sort of drawn up into that space. A field of concrete corn or something, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Mr. Way.
So I'll just repeat again, great direction, breaking up the massing, putting that open space out on that key corner. I think that the open space, that corner space, and I'm saying the corner space and the courtyard altogether, is such a great opportunity. And I think it just needs some more detailed design, and I know you're not there yet. So, and again, because I think that you've nailed the massing and all that, you know, I think I don't need to spend any time on that, but I think the Franz Road frontage, I think you have the ability to start to set the tone for the future of that road as it goes, you know, towards Tuttle. I'm struggling with these steps, the lawn steps or whatever. I think that's basically wasted space to me. It's not really usable. And I'd rather see you either put in a retaining wall that pushes back or comes forward, depending on where you want to put. And I'm almost wanting to push it back so you've got this really nice space right along Upper Metro Place that's very usable, and you could just, you know, and linked and all that. And then you've got this other space, which is about still public, but a little bit more separated and kind of about the restaurant and all that stuff. I would really, really urge you to show some options for the pool, because, you know, if you look at the open space that's woven around the pool, you know, people are really going to be challenged to, like, is this private or is this public? And so the more space that you can connect together that looks public, I think the better. And I wouldn't mind if you push the pool to the west, more up against where that green square is. Make that the pool, and then you've got more contiguous open space. I'd really love it if the pool was in the back, personally. And you already addressed that then gets into the parking issue. So, you know, this is going to be a give and take, I think, a little bit. But there's so much opportunity here. I think you're headed in the right direction. I would urge you, like we have done other projects, to work with the Arts Council on what that might be on the corner. And I think, you know, they've got, you know, Mr. Guillaume is curating a lot of stuff around the city, and I think this is, you know, it almost becomes, you know, Franz Road almost becomes this series of art installations, right, with the Field of Corn and stuff. Not, again, the Field of Corn, but something different. I think this sets up maybe a whole series of opportunities there. So, great opportunity. I think the stone wall, I don't know who owns the stone wall, but it's not fitting into the vibe here anymore. It's a remnant, it's a leftover. I do not like diagonal parking, just to let my commissioners know. I'm fine with the parallel parking. That's fine. And then, you know, in addition to the massing, you're starting to show color and stuff like that. There's now a whole family of buildings along Upper Metro Place with different color bricks and stuff like that. I would hope that it would fit into that kind of family of colors and not stand out as being something different. So, did I answer all the questions? I think I did. Oh, the parking. You know, we got to get the parking plan right. And I struggle a little bit right now is I don't understand how the parking works in the under the building. If I could see a plan of that and see how it's working and how you're using the footprint of the building to get the parking in, can you push that footprint a little bit out beyond the building and pick up some more spaces. I don't know if you've explored that or not, but I think there's some room there. But I think we can have that conversation as we go forward. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Schneer.
It's a great project. I mean, you've done a great job in getting the vibe from the commission, and I think it shows. I think we're all sharing a concern about the public use. The calculation, I don't want to get hung up on the calculation. It was 8-9% shy. Now there's an indication that may be dated, and it may in fact be on point. But then it's sort of objective and subjective, it's qualitative and quantitative. Okay, you meet the number, but how is it laid out? And there's some little sort of orphan parcels or parts that are included in that calculation that really the public is not going to feel comfortable or appropriate to go to. How that fits, what percentage of that is, of the total, I don't know. I didn't use a ruler for that. And even with the plan that you showed, it's still unclear to me how inviting that buffer between the pool, which is appropriately private. This isn't the Dublin Rec Center. It is a private use. But how inviting is the rest of that? So it looks like it is, but how it's, how it's landscaped and how it's laid out. And I'm just concerned that it's not sufficiently public. And we've had this issue, with restaurants and other applications where, yeah, that's the public part, but we know that I'm just not feeling really comfortable about being there because I know that's somebody else's property. I think you've done a great job in trying to thread that needle. I'm not sure you're quite there yet, so I urge you to keep playing with that a little bit, but otherwise I like the project.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. I echo quite a few of the comments, and Mr. McCabe, also your comment, there's been a lot of work on this. I look at the articulation of the building and it looks fantastic. I look at the balconies, and to hear the call out of every unit will have a balcony, that is not just good for architecture, but good for street activation. You see activity not just at the street level, but also at the upper levels. The change in the building orientation, all very positive. The activation, the tables and everything along France Road, also good. The plaza addition is a positive. I'm going to put a little asterisk on that for just a moment. And then your call out with fire lane. If that fire lane is deleted on the south side, pushing everything back opens up some of that open space and may negate the -8, -9% of open space. The last one, the Dublin fence, that to me shows that you're looking at Dublin. And we appreciate that. On this particular property, especially where we're sensitive to the open space and having it function like a public open space, very inviting, come in, I probably wouldn't advocate for the Dublin fencing around that particular corner. Couple of negatives, and then I'll go into the caveat. The on-street parking, I'm not a fan of, and I couldn't get my brain around why I wasn't a fan of it until this time around. This is a right in, right out, and you're going to come in on the wrong side of the road. So if you're going to the Goat, if you're going to that restaurant, if you're patronizing, you're not necessarily going to know that the parking's around the other side of the building. And you're going to have resident parking. But to get into one of those spaces, well, you can't cross traffic, that's illegal. And are we going to turn around at the other parcel and then try to hook a U-turn and get one of the spots? And what if it fills up before you get there? Hearing that there's potential for the city to do parallel parking or on-street parking on the other side of the road may mitigate some of my pause, my hesitation in that on-street parking, but that's my concern there. And then back to the caveat. I love that there is a plaza. I love that there is activation on that corner. I'm also not a huge fan of the step up into the concrete landing because, again, that step up is another barrier. It's another, you're walking up to either the business property or the open space that is for the private realm. Playing with that, and I encourage you to look at what works with your parcel, what works with your uses, what works with the tenant population you're going for. But if you shift that plaza back, I like the idea of taking the pool and rotating it onto that green rectangle. Then you can do something very nice with linear and pull someone in, and then in an angle and a swoop within the center, put the public art or whatever that invites everyone in, opens it up. And then we don't care so much about where the line is between this is public, this is private, because you don't go into the pool area, it's back for residents, but this whole other area is just inviting. And again, I'll echo, the totem, whatever that art piece is, our Arts Council is fantastic. And so I encourage you to work with them. All right, Mr. McCabe, any clarification, any questions that you may have hearing the deliberation of the commission this evening?
And you've all been very gracious. Appreciate that. It's always gets your energy back when everybody sees things in a similar light. In terms of the activation of the public space, and this is obviously a point of beginning, but other types of activities that you all may be inclined to think should take place there that are more activated? Are there other kinds of things that we should be considering?
I think we love creativity. Okay. And so there's not we must have basketball courts. There's not let's do bocce ball. There's not but I would look to the rest of the commission. We love variety and we love creativity. Okay. And so if it's, hey, we found a cool way to do.
Yep. Very timely, very timely. Bocce is summertime curling.
That was a great response. That's what we were looking for, because we didn't want to find ourselves kind of boxed in that, hey, there's a kind of a more stoic approach to what that public space needs to be. If you're open, we've got a great guy over here that loves to consider things like that. So the next time around,
we talk about placemaking a lot, and part of it is what's the draw, what's the activity, right? To the point of I even go to if it is. And I'm not advocating for this necessarily, but you know how it is. You put a band out there, all of a sudden, just a band and music, the sound draws public in. So I just, apply that very human touch in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. The sort of intuitive barriers that everybody sort of referred to. I think that's the level of design touch. I think all that needs at this point.
Fantastic, and that's a great place to do it. There's no other neighbors to that side of the building. So if we're a little loud, a little raucous, nobody's going to really worry except the people who live there, right? Great.
And you heard we love that activation.
Yes.
And, well, ruckus is a little bit extreme on the activation.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe.
If I could just make one point of clarification on behalf of the engineering staff, we have had considerable conversations about the on-street parking, and just a point of clarification, that would be developer-driven. The city's not proposing to do the on-street parking, so just a point of clarification.
Thank you for that. All right, making sure we didn't have any last-minute public comment on that particular item. Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on to the next case on our agenda this evening, Ohio Health Dublin Methodist Hospital, 905, 6955, 7450, 7500 Hospital Drive, 21-190 AFDP Amended Final Development Plan. This application is a request for sign modification to permit 2 new signs and modifications to 3 existing signs for a hospital on a roughly 53-acre site zoned planned unit district, development district, Ohio Health. The site is west of the intersections of Hospital Drive with Avery Muirfield Drive. Mr. Henschel, welcome back. I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you very much. Give me just one moment as it is loading up for us. Perfect. This is a request for review and determination of an amended final development plan for the Ohio Health Dublin Methodist Hospital and their updated sign plan. The site is highlighted in yellow on your screen. We'll be focusing on the larger of the parcels that is highlighted at the center of the screen. This is a 53.28 acre site that is zoned PUD, which would be Plan Unit Development District, for the Ohio Health Campus. A bit of history regarding the development of this site. In February of 2004, this was rezoned to PUD for the current use. In May 2005, the final development plan and sign package were approved for the 310,000 square foot hospital. November 2006 was when the medical office building was approved and added, which is 99,000 square feet. And then in 2009, there was an amended final development plan for minor modifications to new signs throughout the campus and signs to the medical office building. So as this was a rezoning and this is a PUD, there is a development text that accompanies the site. This development text was approved in 2004 with the rezoning. The current text does not limit number, size, or height of new or existing signs, but it does state that signs are to be appropriately sized and adequate in their exposure to allow passing traffic to easily identify and locate the campus. Planning and Zoning Commission does have full review and approval discretion of signs. It should be noted that staff would not anticipate development text as general as this one to be approved should something come forward in the future to City Council. So some background regarding existing signs. So shown on the screen are two signs that would be modified with this proposal. The left photo would be the largest sign on the campus, which faces the south elevation along US 33. This is the primary highway identification sign that would be modified. And then to the right, you'll see the main entrance monument sign. This is one of two monument signs that line the entrance from Hospital Drive to the southeast. Again, this would be modified with the proposal. So shown on the screen is an overall view of the site. We will be touching on the revised and new signs that are proposed today with the sign package. First, the applicant is proposing to revise the highway wall sign, which is highlighted in green and circled at the center of the south elevation of the hospital building. Additionally, they are proposing two new wall signs, which will be located on that same facade or same elevation of the building along US 33 and Hospital Drive. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to modify the two existing monument signs that are located at the main entrance to the southeast of the site, and that would be highlighted in orange. Finally, the applicant is proposing to update its street address identification signs. These are typically signs that do not require sign permits, but they would just be modifying the color of those. So first, we will be focusing on the revised US 33 wall sign, which is circled on the photo in the top right corner. Again, this is on the south elevation and it does face US 33. The applicant is proposing to replace the existing 356 square foot sign with a 330 square foot wall sign. This wall sign will remain in the same exact location, same height of 61 feet from the top of the sign to grade. It'll be constructed of silver aluminum channel letters and will be internally illuminated with a white trim cap. This does switch from the blue trim caps that are currently on those signs. This is to update the visibility of the campus and of these signs from visitors coming to the campus. The first of the two new wall signs that are proposed is shown on the screen. This is identified as WPI3 in the sign package. The applicant is proposing a 91.31 square foot wall primary identification sign, which will be located above the entrance, the main entrance into the hospital. And it'll be mounted to the existing brick facade. This is 31 feet in height from the top of the sign to grade. And similarly will be constructed of silver aluminum channel letters and will be internally illuminated white. And the second of the two new wall signs will be located about 9 feet from grade to the top of the sign. It will be 57.28 square feet in size. This is to be located adjacent to the entrance into the building. There is also an existing address identification sign, which is just to the left of the white circle, the second on the bottom image. This would be a non-illuminated sign, so it'll be painted white. There are a mix of both illuminated and non-illuminated signs. They will all be white with this proposal. So going through what is existing in terms of square footage and height and what is proposed, we are moving from one existing 356 square foot sign to 3 new signs, which total 478.59 square feet in size. This does increase the total square footage of signs to 122.59 square feet, or it is increasing from the original sign count. As stated, the development text does not limit the number, size, or location of these signs, and it is up to the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval of those. Additionally, on the site, the applicant is proposing to revise 2 existing monument signs, which are located on the entrance boulevard off of Hospital Drive. Both of these signs are currently 62 square feet. They will remain 62 square feet. Currently, there are blue channel letters that are mounted to the existing brick monument sign. The brick monument sign will be maintained. However, the channel letters will be removed and there will be a new aluminum cabinet that will have blue push-through letters that will be internally illuminated. The applicant is proposing to paint the recessed brick base just below the new cabinet that will stand 5 feet in height. Staff is recommending that the applicant provide a brick that is complementary to the existing base rather than painting brick to complement the existing base. Additionally, the applicant did not provide a landscape plan. However, staff is recommending that they provide us a landscape plan just to remain consistent with the requirements of the zoning code. And finally, the applicant is updating their address identification signs from a blue to a white. There are a number that are internally illuminated as well as non-internally illuminated. Those that are internally illuminated will be white, similar to the other signs, and those that are not will be painted white. So staff has reviewed this application to all applicable criteria and are recommending approval with 2 conditions regarding the monument signs. I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have for staff. Otherwise, our applicant is here to address your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henschel. Looking for questions for staff at this time. Seeing none. Welcome. Welcome. Did you want to come up and make a statement?
I'm Jim Lytle. I'm Ohio Health Signage Consultant. Been that way for quite a while. So we're here, basically, we have kind of 2 issues at play. One is that the biggest issue is wayfinding. And what we have found since the hospital has been built is the signs that were, put up with the hospital campus and on the building itself isn't very effective for people finding their way to the hospital specifically. We have people going into the medical office building now that think they're in the hospital. So the reason that we're kind of trying to get them more funneled into that whole structure of the architecture was supposed to help folks focus in on that and realize that that's the main entrance for the hospital. It's not working the way we want it to do. So the reason for the logo at the top, that's no longer a brand standard for us where we combine the Ohio Health logo and the name of the hospital. There's just too much information. As you can see there, we've now switched over to just the Ohio Health logo, which is what we're doing system-wide on other locations. I added the channel letters down low to also help direct people to the main entrance of the hospital. This has worked really well in some other locations. And again, this is a continuation of the way we're now doing standards for all of our exterior signs that let people know that they're in the right location. This is probably the most critical sign of all of them right here, so that people will know that this is actually the entrance to the hospital. And then down below, to kind of reinforce that, this is again something we do with a standard now at a lot of our hospital campuses, is we put this logo that's non-illuminated next to the main door of the hospital. And it's kind of hard to miss when you look above, you look straight ahead, and you look down below, and you know that's the door you need to go into. Let's see. The wall sign, or excuse me, the ground signs, we have those two directionals out by the front entrance to the campus that we're going to basically replace with the same type of sign. No, I'm not going in your order here, but we have a little bit of an issue with a lot of the signs on the campus, or some of the signs, when they were first originally fabricated and installed. There's some structural issues, and we're starting to lose integrity of some of these signs, actually kind of losing their verticalness, for lack of a better way to say it. So this is kind of the first phase that we want to do now with the most critical signs. Down the road, we probably will come back and ask to go in and replace a lot of the other existing signs with same, only new foundation, new steel, all that stuff, so we don't have this problem of, you know, faded signs that are leaning one way or the other. In this situation, for the entry, again, for the campus entrance, the old sign, probably back when it was first put in, worked fairly well. It's halo illuminated. The way the indicia, which is what they call their symbol, the way that's built is it's halo illuminated, so at night you don't see the symbol, you see a white dot. So we're going to try to carry it through with our new standard that we're using at other locations like Riverside and that type of thing, where we're putting a silver cabinet with the logo and the name of the campus and the address numbers onto some form of a wall, either brick, stone, or something like that. This is carrying forward with our standard across the system. And I think that'll work a lot more effective for people coming down around, you know, Hospital Drive to find the correct way to get into the campus. So that's really the critical issue, is wayfinding more than anything else, is trying to help people find their way into the right door. And the integrity of some of those signs that have been up for quite a while and are starting to kind of show their age. So, that make sense?
Yep, thank you. Questions for the applicant? Mr. Way?
So I know you're only doing certain signs right now, and in this package, you have a number of signs that the base is stone versus brick. And you said that over time you might replace other signs. Do you have an idea of whether you're going to stick with stone for some and brick for other bases, or?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a real good question, because we've tried to be consistent on other campuses, and for some strange reason, this didn't happen this way. You've got the entry feature that's brick, and then you've got some of those that are stone. I would prefer to go with brick on everything, because that's what we're doing everywhere else. And it doesn't, when the lawnmowers when they hit it, it doesn't do as much damage as the stone. We've continually have to replace stone on some of the signs that they're only stuck on, you know, they're lick and stick, and they come off too easily. So to answer your question, short answer, yeah, we'll probably go with all brick.
So my comment was going to be, I really like the stone.
Oh, you do like the stone. Well, let me rephrase my answer then.
Because, well, you have some stone ones that have mortar in them, and I don't think that's successful. It's the dry ones that look really nice, and they kind of fit into Dublin.
It matches the wall by the main feature wall that you go into the building, just like some of our other campuses. So,
and if you look at the brick ones, they are, you know, you can see the failure of the mortar and stuff, and they're not aging well, right?
No.
So I was going to say, would you consider going stone as the
We could, yeah.
material?
Yeah, there's stone there already on some of them, so why not do the same thing on all of them? Absolutely.
It just, when you look through this package, I was like, why is stone here and brick
Yeah.
here? And that would just be my comment, is that consistency, yes.
Yeah.
Whether it's brick or stone, I like the brick. I just think it fits into the kind of the Dublin, but I'm supportive of what you're trying to do. I just, that monumental sign where you have to replace the brick on the bottom, I'm like, well, geez, just do the whole thing over in stone and just be done with it. But
Yeah, we can do that. The way we build our signs now, we don't get elaborate on the foundation. We don't literally build a quote-unquote foundation. All of those now are actually they're on cement board on the bottom of each one of those sign units. And we drop the whole sign down on top of the steel pole. And that way it's great to fix, it's great to pull off. You're not getting into, real in-depth masonry on the bottom of all those signs, so. And hopefully they won't kind of start doing this. So.
Just to be clear for everybody, the signs still have a foundation. It's just the steel is doing the work, not the.
Right, yeah, they were bolted on the bottom, and basically what happened was the welds on the cabinet failed. And that's why they were breaking off and falling over, so. We like steel.
Other questions for the applicant at this time?
Maybe. Joe, how about this? This wayfinding on this site, I get it. The building is a wealth of, it's a lovely building, right? But it's a wealth of masses, which legibility lends itself to legibility problems. Unlike the building across the highway, which is two big masses, so it's you can't miss some of those.
4 square walls, yeah.
Right. So I guess I'm entirely sensitive and on board with that. I heard you loud and clear that making sure people get to the main doors is part of it. Right, we can potentially solve that in part with signage. I'm going somewhere else though. This is now as much a question for what purview do you have with the organization and what influence can you exert? Because I could also go to that primary canopy at that front. If it were very intentionally lit different. Right, right. Like if somebody came back and that's less signage, that's more. Right. So, and you know how it is, linear kind of, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, you sort of light that thing up in a very different way, and all of a sudden, it starts to do a bunch of the heavy lifting for you, or even the glass cube that's right there adjacent to it. So it's just a general sort of advocacy that there's opportunity there too.
I've got Doug Hahn from Ohio Health here with me in case I needed backup. So
that's perfect. Well, then Doug
heard
it as well.
Yeah.
Doug heard it as well, because all those moves accumulate, and then it's not just the signage.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to deliberation. Mr. Schneer, do you want to start us off?
Well, it's supposedly not appropriate to personalize our deliberations, but having wandered around there, I applaud your efforts. It does need some help. I think I'm supportive. A lot of thought has obviously gone into this, and so I approve the concept and would be in favor of it.
Mr. Way?
Thank you. I think I've made my comments. I'm supportive of it. I would urge consistency of material. And stone's really nice.
Mr. Grimes?
Yep, time for a tune-up.
Mr. Suplak?
How about this? I really like the stone touches, by the way. I'm going to second what Mr. Way said on that, the stacked stone in lieu of the brick. I am struggling, there's only one I'm struggling with. It's the Dublin Methodist, the big one that's being added.
WPI 3.
Yeah, I struggle with this one. I don't know that it's doing, don't get me wrong, I understand you're taking, the branding of all this, you're taking down Dublin Methodist off the top, replacing it with Ohio Health, and so you feel like you got to get Dublin Methodist on the building. I'm not convinced this one is necessary, and it's pretty sizable. I would actually support a sign underneath far more, right. The adjustments up top, the one underneath, I struggle with this one.
Yeah, and I understand that. If we take that one that's down, that's at the top of the tower, which currently does say Dublin Methodist Hospital, we've lost that identification for that tower component of the building. That's why I'm bringing it back down lower to closer to the entrance. There's a lot of stuff. You can see that there's a lot of trees and everything else that have grown up since this building was first put in. But I think what it does is, as I said, I've stood there and watched people, and they get out of their car and they stand and they do this, and they look at both entrances and they try to figure out which one to go into, because they can't see this clear up above the tower because the glass and everything blocks it. So that's where I want to make sure that we want to make sure they understand that they're at the right hospital, first of all.
Can I make an alternate suggestion while we're staring at that? Oh, forgive me. I guess I'm not everyone's staring at it with me.
What's that?
Well, I guess I'm still going to, I still struggle with it. Again, I get your rationale. You do not see that the tower, is backing away. And again, that's a highway oriented element regardless. Mm-hmm. And we don't necessarily have it. I don't know if we can get to Google Street View and stare. You can look right down at, if you go to Google Street View, you can stare right at the approach to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm still going to, I think it either has to do with, maybe it's in lieu of the above the canopy and below the canopy. There's one you could mount hanging from the bottom of the canopy potentially that is right there in front of you and might do the trick.
We could look at something like that, yeah. Yeah, there's going to be some tree trimming, obviously, for trying to clear that up. But
what's that?
It says Google there, 2019.
There you go.
Yeah, the trees are 2 years older.
Yeah. See, that's why, if you can see the brick area above the canopy, that's why I located it there, because it's really the only square footage on this building that lends itself for a sign.
Well, and again, from this view, you're going to see the one above and you're going to see the one below. Mm-hmm. The one above is sort of set back and still covered up by the canopy. I guess I'm, and I don't need to beat a dead horse. I'm just worried that one is not doing quite what it needs to do. I almost feel like if you put it right there on the bottom of the canopy, could you mount it hanging right there? And it might not be a sign panel. It might be individual channeled letters that sort of glow at you, but all of a sudden it's doing the work of both of those signs really, really effectively.
Yeah, if there's also, interestingly enough, they tried to solve this problem early on, and they actually have letters in vinyl on that beam just right above your cursor there. Zach, yeah, right there. It's up higher on the canopy, I believe, but it says hospital entrance, and it doesn't work at all. You don't even see it. It's just kind of it was an exercise.
Yeah. Well, no, vinyl doesn't.
Nobody ever sees that. Yeah.
Right.
Can I add a comment?
Yes.
To me, there's a brick mass there that something on it would be really good to break it up. So I think it's right to me. Christ Hospital hung letters off their canopy, and they're going to tear them out because it's something was not installed correctly, and it's all rusting down the letters.
The birds like them?
No, they're rusting down the letters, and it's a real problem for them. But that was probably bad installation.
We've also done this same kind of technique at Pickerington, at Grove City. We start to do that now on all the hospitals, where we all identify the name of the hospital fairly close to the logo if we can. If not, we still try to get it visible from all angles, so.
Okay, tying back up deliberation, any final comments?
No, I would just reiterate as we're staring at this, if we step back even, right, that glass cube, the canopy, some measure of sort of glowing that in a really compelling way.
That's a great idea.
Really, really helps you as well.
Yeah,
Just
I like that idea a lot. You bet.
So I will wrap us up with just a couple of comments. I'm uncomfortable with square footage.
Are you?
We're
The top one's
increasing.
actually smaller.
We're increasing overall 34%. We're adding 34% sign square footage. And the city and the city council has challenged us to make sure that we're looking at these things from the perspective of the code. So I'm uncomfortable with the 34% increase. I understand the use requires wayfinding. We want people to be able to find the hospital. We want people to be able to find the entrance. We want people to, be able to perceive that from different levels. But I don't think that the city's responsibility is to make sure that the branding is completely in place. Wayfinding, absolutely. We need to honor the code as far as what the code allows for, and we do have some purview as the Planning and Zoning Commission for a sign plan. That's why sign packages are brought before us. I think that there are some opportunities. I do think that the building itself presents challenges. You're looking at street view right now, and you see the articulation, and you see nothing behind it. From the highway, of course, we have the parking lot before the building, and so that elevation is critical. I do think that we have some opportunities for, the branding itself, the icon. I forget the
Indicia.
Indicia.
It's our $20 word.
There's a company I used to work with called Indicia. So
sorry.
Indicia could be the branding on the building, and I understand that presents challenges. But we're looking right now, even though we can't see them from the different planes, we're looking at 3 signs on one elevation.
Right.
And we don't typically do that. And so I'd like to draw attention to the rest of the commission to, we are looking at an item presented to us asking for approval of 3 signs on one frontage, on one elevation of a building. So I would like the commission to consider that and the increase of the 34% square footage in making your decisions.
I would just add that percentage is in proportion to how many square feet of facade that faces the highway. I think
the same that exists today.
I know, but it's a big building. It can handle some addition. It can handle just
our recent applications have been granted 10% less than one of those signs, one of the 3. So we approved up to 300 square feet. We have 330, 191, 157, all on one elevation. Now, granted, the existing sign is 356. So
Right.
the 300 is significantly less than that, but it's only 10% less. And, well, we're talking.
I guess my point is it's in proportion to the facade that they're putting the signage on, and I think the facade here is.
The other application was equally large.
Okay.
But there is, how about this, relative to that commentary, this is multiple facades.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
It's also broken up, right? It's like 3 different buildings almost. So you could have, say there's 1 sign per building.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're understanding that people could come forward and say precedent and you did it for, and so why can't you? I want to be very sensitive to that. And if the commission supports that, then that's great. But I just want to draw attention to it.
And I appreciate that very much. I'm not sure if I was involved in that case, so I'm not familiar with it.
I think the precedential value of this, though, it has to be relative to the facts. So the implication is there's the metrics, and then there's the coverage, there's the size of the buildings, there's the location. I won't fall on my sword over this, but if another large hospital campus or university campus had a similar situation, I would probably, I won't go on record, but I'll go on record saying I would probably support it. If it were, a couple restaurants or something, but the place, the higher use of trying to get people to a hospital, I think trumps a lot of the metrics, in my opinion.
All right. Any final deliberation? I will just state again before we take a vote that I'll just draw attention to my previous comments. Okay? Any final discussion, deliberation? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So
we're
moved.
doing one? Yes, one motion to approve the amended final development plan with 2 conditions. Could you present the 2 conditions just so we can see those?
Yes, and we amended one to address the stone comment, just.
Perfect.
Sorry, I'm getting this modified really quick. I apologize.
Is that number 1, where number 3 is?
Yes, that is number 1, reworked to include the stone base for the monument signs rather than the brick base.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
And my only other clarification would be, is it for the columns as well? Did you intend that to be for the columns as well? So not just the base, but the columns should be stone as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the whole, yeah, you wouldn't want to mix stone.
That's
and
fine,
brick.
I just want to make sure that this is.
And it's stacked stone, right?
Just looking, Mr. Lytle, are you in support of the brick to stone change? Could you turn your microphone on, please?
I turned it off already. Are you all right with the brick on the existing curved entry feature signs as I had showed them?
I think the suggestion was that all of those monumental signs would have brick, and all of that, those features out along the edge would be stone.
So, yeah, so what you're saying is we would need to convert those to stone on the outside columns, you think? And then we could leave the brick as is on the face and, worry about what we're doing down below that, like I had a discussion with Zach on.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, we're saying we want to do stone on all the signs, and I'm all for that. I'm just trying to figure out on this particular sign, do you also want to incorporate the stone on the 2 opposing columns?
Correct.
Okay, and we can leave the face or whatever little bit you're going to see brick for that. It's going to be taking up most of that space, as you can see. I don't even know if you'll see the brick.
Are you suggesting where you were painting it, you want to leave that brick?
Yeah, well, that's what Zach had mentioned to me, and I could probably put stone down there as well, so you'd have the 2 columns in the base stone. Does that sound good?
Preferably it would be all stone.
Okay, can do.
All right, I'm seeing head nod also, so just making sure that we're clear. All right?
You good with that?
All right, the conditions have been modified on the screen. I'll wait for the commission to review, ensure that that captures the desires. I will entertain a motion. Thank you, Mr. Grimes.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Mr. Supalack?
Yes.
Ms. Call? Mr. Schneer?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. And
Thank you very much.
And we certainly do appreciate your partnership and your presence in the community. I'm sure that you heard earlier that we appreciate medical services and emergency services within our facility, and hopefully we're good neighbors to you as well. So thank you very much for coming before us.
We could talk about that too if you really wanted to, but we're going to stay quiet, so. Thanks, folks.
Understood. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting toward the end of our agenda this evening. We have the, I don't remember exactly what it's called, so I'm trying to flip feverishly. Rules and Regulations Update 22-017 ADMO, Administrative Review, Other. I like the classification. This application is a request for a review and recommendation of City Council for proposed updates to the Planning and Zoning Commission's rules and regulations. Ms. Roush, I will turn the time over to you.
Good evening. Thank you. Yes, so this is an opportunity for us to talk about our rules and regulations for the, not just the Planning and Zoning Commission, but, well, tonight you're talking about your rules and regulations, but we're looking at this globally just for your awareness. And this is really related to how to handle potential virtual participation of applicants and board members. So obviously the rules and regs deal with all types of procedural aspects as well as operations of the commission's makeup, things like that related to Robert's Rules of Order as well as the code, Dublin City Code, and incorporating all those details. So we have a guidebook of how we're running our meetings. They were last updated in 2010. During COVID, obviously, we had the opportunity through a legislative act at the state level to have virtual meetings and allow for business to continue that way. Following on, I believe it was like summertime or fall of this year, City Council then enacted legislation at our local level to allow for there be the opportunity for virtual participation in some capacity. So this is then the opportunity to clean that up and have the commission weigh in on what the parameters are being proposed for this commission. And like I said, it'll be addressed through ARB, BZA, and the CSAC as well. So looking for your feedback about what's being proposed. And again, the major revisions, we made some minor technical things related to our division name and things like that. But the major details are looking at, City Council really wanting boards and commission members to be in person, understanding that there may be some COVID purposes or other emergency, but largely related to the pandemic, where we would maybe want to have the opportunity for there to be a virtual participation. And so wanting to get your feedback about that, as well as then if that request would be made, the way the regulations are currently drafted, that would have to go to the mayor for final determination, just to make sure we're ensuring consistency. In terms of applicant participation, we would also extend that same opportunity, and that is left to the chair of the particular board or commission to determine that. And then the other piece within the regulations relate to then if for some reason we'd have to switch the entire meeting to a virtual meeting, the mayor would make that determination, and we'd have 48 hours notice and obviously be conducting that as we previously had been through our virtual platform, where you'd have the opportunity, as we do now, for public comment and things like that. So that would be completely transparent. So we wanted to get your feedback. If you're comfortable making a recommendation of approval, that's fine tonight. But if you want to talk through that or have any questions between Thad and myself, hopefully we can answer those questions and go from there. So.
I know that you're all jumping for the opportunity to discuss. So anybody want to go and have any comments on the proposed language? Mr. Sublak.
Definition of applicable emergencies.
I mean, the original intent was COVID-based. But again, I think our understanding is wanting to hear your feedback as well. So I don't know, Thad, do you have anything else?
No, I mean, this originated, of course, out of the pandemic, but in the draft that's before you, it does not specify a COVID-19 or other pandemic type of emergency. It does not go into any detail as to what type of emergency would qualify. So if you're comfortable with that and leaving it at the discretion of the mayor, whoever that may be, moving forward, over time, if you're comfortable with that, then a recommendation would be one way to proceed. Or if you think that that needs more definition, then that's something certainly for the commission to discuss and recommend further definition to council.
The only addition that I had was definition of participation. So there's a difference between participating as a public member, participating as a commission member who cannot vote, and participation as a commission member who can vote. And so I would just seek for clarification in the text that defines what that participation level is, specifically in relation to full participation, voting, everything, and then clear on participation not voting, as if that person is in the audience or part of the commission. Just again, the details.
Yeah, my understanding from talking to the law director today was that the intent would be, again, given council's adoption of that legislation, you correct me if I'm wrong or she is wrong, is that this would allow participation for commission members to be part of the discussion and also a voting member. So
full participation.
Yes, full participation, but we could definitely clarify that.
So this says a member can't participate because of an emergency. I would assume that's sickness or something, you know, some disability or something. If that's the case, wouldn't they just excuse themselves from that meeting? And why?
Typically speaking, but I think the call out here, the intent here was, I'm not ill, but I was exposed to COVID-19 and therefore I need to quarantine for 14 days, yet I would still like to exercise my appointment as a commission member and participate in the meeting.
And it's one thing if we're all virtual, if it's another if one of us or...
That's the problem I have, just allowing one member off because of something, that they can just excuse themselves from the meeting. We can proceed without them.
But the decision, the chairperson has still, per this, the discretion to allow that person to participate or not. You just can't declare, I'm not coming, I think I've been exposed, I want to participate.
Yeah, so the chair would, if anyone, any applicant wanted to participate virtually, and then the mayor, if any one of us wanted to participate virtually, but the intent is for those extreme cases, for the COVID cases. It could not be, I'm out of town, but I still want to participate, and therefore the intent is not there.
So if it's the flu, if you have the flu, is that the same as having COVID?
Well, I think we're seeking clarification, and council, I believe, is seeking feedback from all of the different boards and commissions on interpretation and application of.
So before COVID, right, and before all this virtual stuff, if somebody got sick, they would just not call in sick, right, and not show up. So this is
That's probably still the case.
yeah,
correct.
So I don't know.
If you're exposed.
I thought where this was going was it was more just when do we go virtual versus not go virtual?
Well, one of the call-outs, one of the examples that one of the council members gave us was, what about the person who's on a board or commission who's maybe immunocompromised? We're in the middle of a pandemic and they're not ill.
Right.
They seek to fill their commitment, but don't want to subject themselves to the likelihood of a Delta variant, whatever variant is currently out there. It's directly in reaction to the pandemic.
Gotcha. So you don't have to be sick, just don't want to be infected by other people. Right.
Could, yes.
There's two levels, though. So the mayor has the sole authority to determine whether meetings should be virtual for the whole commission. So the first stage is, okay, there's a problem, we're going virtual.
Yeah.
But the mayor doesn't do that because, for whatever reason. Now one or more members makes a self-determination, they don't want to participate for whatever reason, and that goes to the chairperson who can decide not to do that.
Clarification, even if, so in the draft, section 2, commission members, C, attendance members 3, the mayor may permit a member to participate virtually in the event of an emergency. Members must request virtual participation prior to any meeting. that the member would like to participate virtually. So it's still the mayor
Still
or
the
one
mayor.
of us.
It's still the mayor. I was looking at,
Or an applicant.
Yeah.
It's the chairperson.
or so for an
Speaking of which, does that get us off the hook of defining emergency?
Yeah.
In any way, shape, or form, because then there is the.
Yeah.
However, as the chairperson, I would seek clarification for emergency. If somebody contacts me and says, I have an emergency and leaves it at that, I mean.
I think the discretion, I had a field, I marked this whole thing up. I mean, I literally, and Jenny knows, I mean, I marked everything up because there was lots of internal inconsistencies in pronouns and text, and this is where I get off. But I think you want the definition, you don't want definition defined of an emergency. The way I redrafted it is said it's in the sole discretion. So when you have because now you're going to try split hairs, what is an emergency? What's an emergency to an applicant, or in the mayor's case, an emergency to a commission member who's seeking to get out may not be. So now you're trying to enumerate all the situations that could be an emergency. So I put language in here. If it's an applicant that declares an emergency, it's whether that person can participate virtually is the sole discretion of the chairperson. If it's one of us who wants to participate, it's the sole discretion of the mayor. And I think that's a better standard. If it's abused, there's remedies to that. If you use that to excuse people and we don't have quorums, so I would err on the side of providing the deliberating party the discretion. You also have discretion, surprisingly, in here, you have discretion to cut off discussion.
Yeah, almost exercised that.
Of applicants, but you don't have authority in here to cut off discussion among commissioners. You can't say you've spoken too long, but you can say to an applicant or a public member, you've spoken too long. And it even had
you might have spoken too long.
It even had a 5-minute limitation, which I actually took off, that all public comments are limited to 5 minutes.
We used to have 3 in my former city.
Again.
All right, I'm fine with the language. I would seek clarification on what was it? It wasn't the definition of an emergency, it was thank you. So just participation, but other than that, I'm fine with the language. Any other discussion?
What do you need from us?
If you are happy with the language as proposed, then what we would need is a vote to recommend adoption by City Council.
All right, so I'm going somewhere else, right? There's a conversation generally about the bones, and there's a conversation about, I think,
The premise?
Well, right, there's a conversation about the premise, but then there's a conversation about some of the touch-up that I think you also alluded to. Do we need to, aside from making a recommendation, is that
we
just?
Can ask staff to clean up the language and to provide the feedback to City Council that we would like a definition on participation.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
Because it's coming from multiple
Done and done.
commissions, committees. All right, I will entertain a motion. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal?
Mr. Schneier?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Mr. Supalack?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Communications? Any?
I don't have any.
All right. Anything else? We missed Warren this evening. We knew based on our last meeting he wasn't going to be able to be with us, but we certainly missed him. Any updates as far as the vacant positions? Have you heard anything?
I have heard it is posted on the website and there's candidates. I don't know if it's still open, but if it is, then definitely encouraging people.
Do you know how long it takes to interview all those applicants? I mean, we're talking.
Chomping at the bit.
Are you kidding?
It's the best
All
show
right.
in town.
On Thursdays.
All right. Our next meeting, 2 weeks? Are we 2 weeks or are we 3 weeks? 2 weeks. March 3rd. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday evening, a great day tomorrow, and a holiday for those of you who get to enjoy it on Monday.
For those of you who observe.
Who get to enjoy it, observe.